We partnered with the Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative to participate today. And we're going to talk a little bit right now about Wright-Hennepin and some of the changes that we're having for 2026 and a little bit of installation information. So, all right. My name is Robin Nisbet, and I am the program manager here. I've been here at Wright-Hennepin for 26 years, so been fortunate enough to be able to learn a lot along the way, and so very happy to share my knowledge with you today. Wright-Hennepin, just a little bit about Wright-Hennepin. We're the fourth largest cooperative in Minnesota. We serve about 61,000 consumers in northwestern Hennepin and Wright County. We have approximately 67,600 meters in the field, and we also have just a little bit over 23,400 members participating in an energy saving program. We're going to talk about those today. So that's about 38% of our membership on a program, and members can have multiple devices on a program. So we have about 37,000 devices out there on some kind of program. And we have 150 employees here. And we have a couple different diversified businesses. Wright-Hennepin Electric, we obviously supply energy to members. We have a security business. We have an appliance repair business. We also have a security monitoring station and a tree services. So we've got some different diversified stuff here at Wright-Hennepin. So energy savings, we'll get right into it. So why do we do energy saving programs and offer rebates? For one, it's a member benefit. We try to prioritize the member's interest by helping to reduce energy and enhancing efficiency. There's also environmental impacts. We promote sustainability. We try to lower greenhouse gases, gas emissions, and minimize environmental impacts. They definitely help us with grid reliability. It decreases the strain on the grid during peak demands, and this helps enable us to offer reliable and affordable electricity to our membership. And then obviously there's regulatory compliance that we have to partake in. We have to fulfill state and federal requirements by benefiting the member through energy efficient initiatives. Some of you have been around, and there's changes that happen in our programs, and so I just wanted to kind of address that a little bit. What do we consider when we are addressing our programs? So why have there been changes in the past? So Wright-Hennepin, we do a rate study every 5 years. That rate study showed us back in 2016 that we were over incentivizing our programs, which the credits and rates that we were giving outweighed the actual savings we were receiving for those people being on programs, or the members. So we made some changes to align the programs and the credits for the actual savings we were receiving for those devices that were on the programs. And so this helps maintain integrity for our rate structure to minimize, so we have non-participating members, and we don't want those non-participating members, it's hard to talk this early in the morning, to subsidize the cost of the program. So how do we determine our rates and programs? So again, we do a rate study every 5 years. Program costs are considered and assessed thoroughly, and we actually do a program evaluation annually on everything that we're offering to the membership, just to make sure we're in alignment. So how do you guys factor into this? You guys are out there in the field. You play a crucial role in our programs, and us helping to educate and help you understand why we offer programs to the members. You have a broad reach, and your customers respect your knowledge. You're experts in your field, and so we feel like you help them make the best choice for them. Member engagement. Educating the members about available programs is really important, and then they get to access that expert, and then your support helps encourage them to take advantage of those programs that are available to them. And then Wright-Hennepin, so we offer education to you guys as a group. If you have you have team meetings, or you have others back at the shop that need help understanding what we're doing in the field, we're happy to come out and be part of your team meeting to give you another level of support. And we have internally here, we have our electrical use consultants. There are field reps, and they can help with any questions that you might have. And then we have a team here internally that can help members with questions that they might have as well. So what do we offer in residential? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this today. I'm going to talk about what changed for 2026 to give you a little feel for that. So we offer home cooling and home heating programs. We offer a ground source heat pump program. We have a couple water heater programs, and then we have electric vehicle charging program. Y'all got like a little handout when you came in. So this laminated sheet is an overview of all of our programs. It's real high level. If you, it's just really to give you a guide, because I know that every co-op and every sorry about that. Sorry about that. Did I turn that off? That every utility has a little bit different way of doing their programs, and so we thought that this might help you weed through that for Wright-Hennepin's sake. So if you have any questions, I won't go through this individually, but we talk about the program. There are two lines. There's an energy saving program line, and there's a conservation or energy conservation and optimization. We call that eco programs. So we have two different programs that we offer, and some of our rebates can be stacked for the members. So and then the rate that's offered, and then also we offer contractor rebates. So in order for you to realize that contractor rebate, your customer, our member, has to name you on the rebate document for you to get that, and send you a check for that. So we can, if there's any questions about this, we can certainly talk about this in a little bit, but look that over. We also provided you with a little notebook. The notebook on the inside cover has a QR code for you if you're in the field and you have a question about the programs. We've got wiring diagrams and the programs and rebates to get you right to the website for that. And then on the back cover is our contact information. There's also a card, because some people don't like to carry stuff around, and it has the same QR codes on it as well. And then on this tabletop, it also has the air source heat pump collaborative information to get to their website as well. So we figure it's all about resources, right? And how we can communicate with you guys. So this year we evaluated our dual fuel program, and we made some changes to the rebate. They're positive changes. So it was $5 per kW. So if you've got a electric garage heater that you want to put on, install in someone's garage, you can put this on our dual fuel program. The rebate is $40 per kWh. Up to 20 kW is the max. That's $800 that the member can realize in a rebate towards a dual fuel application. They pay the lower rate. That rate right now is 6.4 cents per kWh. We did do a rate study last year, so the off-peak rate will increase in May of this year to 7.75 cents per kWh. And that will be a fixed rate. There won't be any changes in that for the next 3 years. The contractor rebate is $50. And so dual fuel, you can utilize an electric boiler. Some people have electric furnaces, baseboard heat, plenum heaters, wall or ceiling heaters, and then also floor heat. Those are all things that can go on the program. And then our water heating program, we've had our quick cash water and our metered water programs around for a long time. They heat the water in the water heater overnight, so the member has that water to use during the day. That's why it's 100 gallons. We call it a storage program. There's the reason why there's two different programs. We have a quick cash program. Member gets a credit on their electric bill, but they get a really large credit towards the tank itself. Tank does not have to be purchased from Wright-Hennepin. You guys can provide them with the tank, but no Wi-Fi or smart tanks, because we would not be able to manage them. if that is in place. So the big change this year was we brought back our Peak Shave water heating program, and that's designed for around a 50-gallon tank with an optional mixing valve. It's only controlled during peak demands or emergency type of situations. The member would get a $5 credit on their bill each month, and they would receive a $200 rebate. Now, we have opened up the Peak Shave program to existing tanks and new tanks. So that's kind of a little different than our other programs. On the rebates, usually it's always required a new tank, but not on the Peak Shave this year. And air source heat pumps, that's what we're here to talk about today with Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative. And I thought we could talk about our program. We have our Quick Cash Air Source Heat Pump Controlled program. So this program requires the member to participate in our off-peak program. Our off-peak program offers a credit. We do not have a rate for air source heat pumps at this time. So with having that be the situation, Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative is going to talk about kind of globally. There are utilities out there that have a rate for air source heat pump. Ours right now is a $5 credit from June through November. When we design a program, our programs are designed to impact our peak demand. And so right now, and with past equipment, we don't find that that heat load is there for control during the winter time when we have a peak demand. So that's the reason why we're incentivizing it this way. Now, as cold climate heat pumps come on scene, we get more information, more data, that might change, but that's the reason why our program is as it is. So with the inverter style air source heat pump that's becoming very popular, because it has a proprietary thermostat, we're not able to manage those units unless they have a utility curtailment on them. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but we developed a new program this year, or updated a program. It's for uncontrolled ductless and ducted units that can't be managed. So we as a co-op, we talked about our responsibility through state and federal guidelines. There are credits available for these units, but we have to give the member something to receive the credit for that. So we are offering a $400 rebate on those. We opened it up to ducted because there were so many out there that were not being able to be to get the credit. The member wasn't. You guys were frustrated because you were able to give them a rebate. So we're trying to rectify that if we can. So the other thing, so when we talk about this, and we talked about stacking rebates. So on the air source heat pump, we have our energy saving program rebate, which is $150 per ton, up to $675. But there's also a QI, which is quality installation program. This is offered through Great River Energy. You have to participate in this to be able to get the rebate to offer it to your member, or to your customer, our member. And so we get a lot of questions on that. So the member can take, if they stack that and they have a 4.5 ton unit, they can get $1,305 in rebate credits. Our credits go to the member as a credit on their electric bill, but we're missing out on some dollars to that end user because there's questions about that QI program. So I just thought I'd touch base on it. There's an online assessment. It's a 35-question online assessment. It's free the first time to take it. Once you take that, then you're on the list. You get a code number that you can go on, and you can order those rebate forms. Now, if you're NATE certified, that also helps you with that that program participation. So if there's any questions, certainly ask. We're absolutely here to help you with that. But just want to make sure that you're able to take advantage of all the programs that are available for the members and your customers. Resources, talked a little bit about that. So Wright-Hennepin, we have a product specialist team that's here available to help you guys, help members. If there's any question about a program or a rebate, or you're installing something and you want to know if it qualifies, we're here to help you, along with our energy use consultants. Our website has rebate forms, it has wiring diagrams, program details, all of those are on our website. We are transitioning to a new website. That'll be in February, but should be a little bit more user-friendly, I guess. That's what they're telling me. So Great River Energy Quality Installation Program, that is that link to that is also on our website. And then the Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative has a great learning resources that we feel would be very helpful too if you have questions. So a little bit about the rebate process. We just want to make sure that you confirm what rebates are available for the jobs that you're quoting to your customers, verifying that it meets the rebate program requirements, can be managed, or if it can't be managed, then you're quoting that. If in the air source heat pump part, you're quoting the correct rebate amount to them. If you're filling out the rebate for the member, and you typically are, we ask that the member sign the rebate form, especially if it has a program attached to it. The member is agreeing to be on that program for 5 years. So the member needs to sign that and say, yep, I understand that. If there's not a program associated with that and you're signing that on behalf of the member, we don't have a problem with that. But if there's a program attached, it's super important that the member is aware of that. Need a copy of the original sales receipt, and then that needs to be submitted within 90 days of the installation. And then include that AHRI certificate when applicable. Rebate dollars are limited and processed on a first-come, first-served basis. In the times I've been working with this program, we've never run out of funds, but it could happen depending upon the popularity of the rebate. They're processed once the final inspection by our electrical use consultant is completed, and then we ask that 6 to 8 weeks is allowed to process that rebate. And then, again, all rebates come back to the member as a credit on their electric bill. Any questions? That was a lot. Anything? So I'm going to bring Grant up, and he's going to talk a little bit about installation.
Okay. I don't know if there's anything on this. Okay. Thank you. That's good. All right, so I'm Grant Bowman, energy use consultant. I've been with Wright-Hennepin now for 11 years. Time goes by fast. And with me, I work with the team. And so most of our team is here. So if my supervisor is Chad Brew, he's in the back there, and Andy Walker, Andy, and Chris Larson. So the three of us are the energy use consultants. So if there's any questions about anything out in the field, or you're planning on something on your job ahead of time, please give us a call. Our information is included in here. And then Troy Mattson is also part of our team on the metering side. So this map gives you a little bit of an idea of our territories that the energy use consultants have. If you call in, anyone, all three of us will talk to you. So it doesn't matter who you talk to. But if it comes to the time of doing the actual checkout, these are the territories that we normally follow. So if we're going to be the one out there doing the checkout for you, and it's something that's a little bit more specialized, maybe you've got multiple heat pumps and some other stuff going on that you had to pre-plan your wiring for and how you're going to control it and everything. It's good to have the person you're talking to out in the field to help do the checkout. So our phone numbers are on there. This is also available on the website. So if you're ever questioning that, you can always find that. We did bring up some stuff for, like we said, we're not spending a lot of time on that at this meeting, but we do have our meters, sockets that are available for the installation for the programs on the table over there, along with the receivers that we use. We have single function, 2-function, and 3-function receivers that we can use for our program. The single function just has a 5-amp relay in it, so usually you're going to see that for just a control situation, like for an air conditioner, for plenum heater, things of that sort. The 2 function has a 5 amp and a 30 amp relay in it, so that's where you're going to use that style of receiver when you're doing a water heater. You use the 30 amp relay to control one leg of the water heater, or like a small garage heater, 4.5 kW, 5 kW or less, we can run through that 30 amp. We have current transformer situations. There are junction boxes over there that we use for that. So if you have any questions on that later, see one of us and we can go over that with you. As Robin already said, there's a change in our website. Coming up here in February, we're going to have a new dressed up look. Hopefully it's a little easier to find some stuff than maybe it was in the past. So you can see old and new there. As you guys look at it and have questions, I'm sure we're going to have questions too. So we'll kind of learn together with that. But basically, you're going to look for your contractors tab, as the arrow is showing there, because that's where most of the information is going to be that you guys want to find. So look for that. Under that, you're going to find things like our wiring diagrams and piping diagrams and that kind of stuff. So we have available to you information on wiring up an electric vehicle. If you guys are working with any of that, I know this is mostly heating in this group versus electricians. We've got diagrams on our radio receivers. If you ever have a question on doing a temporary bypass in the field for like working on something and you can't wait for that delay that goes on, give one of the energy use consultants a call and we can tell you how to get by that. Or we can actually do an opt-out for a day right from our computer, no matter where we are. As long as the receiver is getting communication with our system, we can tell it to not control for 24 hours. You can do your work. And then information on all other programs, water heaters, direct metering, uncontrolled geo, miscellaneous stuff. Again, on the air conditioning program, if you're doing the quick cache, which is our, has load management involved, our units either need to cycle 15 minutes on, 15 off in order to be on the program, get rebates. Or if it's a communicating system like the Bryant carriers out there, where it needs to be programmed into the thermostat, we'll tell the thermostat there's a curtailment, and then the thermostat's going to allow the house to warm up a little bit or get a couple degrees of slip. That's allowed on our program, even if we can't totally turn it off. If there are extra components needed, I know like Linux, you need to order up a kit to allow load management and stuff. It's a contractor member's responsibility to get that stuff installed and working prior to checkout. And if you know the member is going to be wanting rebates and they're going on one of the programs that needs a receiver on it, please do not remove that from the site when you're taking the old equipment away. Leave that there so we can reuse that, because that is a substantial cost to the membership. And if we can reuse one, which we should be able to, if it was working before you got there, we do not want that removed. So just keep that in mind. Okay, anybody see a problem with, there might be a couple problems on this picture. So I was called to do a checkout on this one. Do you think I was successful? So at least the receiver's still there. It's not gone. But there's no power to it and it's not controlling anything the way that whip is hanging there. And I'm hoping that this one really wasn't done, that the electrician was still coming back, because that is not code compliant the way the 240 is been hooked up there. So just saying, before you give us a call, hopefully everything is done. All right, so you did get this handout. One side is explaining our programs. On the air source heat pump programs, there's a QR code there for you to take a picture of. This gets you to GRE's list of units that are that we know of right now that are controllable. And feedback wise, we like to know if you guys are hearing things from your contract or your suppliers or your vendors, your equipment manufacturers, if there's things coming down or ways to control these units. The thing that when we do control them, we want to make sure that we're not creating other issues too. So there's a lot of ways a person can control a unit. We can chop one leg of power to them like we used to, and the unit will stop. But the question is it going to start back up again when the control's gone properly? Are there going to be issues? So those are all things that have to be vetted out before we would put something on this list that's a controllable unit. So the other side is the consortium's information also. So it's a handy little sheet, and it's available to you. Talk a little bit about our uncontrolled geo programs. We still have a geo program. It's been uncontrolled now for quite some years. Just remember when you do the uncontrolled geo program that the heat pump needs to be sized for the load. If you have any backup heat source and they're electric, like plenum heaters or electric boilers, all that kind of stuff, that's okay. You can do that, but they have to be on our dual fuel program. And we have to be able to control those because we don't want to back up electric with electric. That doesn't work. So we need to be able to control those. So that's why if you have them, they need to be on the other program. They'll get the cheaper rate, but they will get turned off for 4 or 5, 6 hours like we normally control. Heat pump will not. The heat pump will keep running. So it's not like they've lost their heat, but if they are getting some supplemental heat, that'll be gone for a couple hours, but it'll come back. That means they're going to have 3 meters on their house. They're going to have their general service meter. They're going to have a meter for the uncontrolled geo because that's at a different rate. And they're going to have the off-peak meter, dual fuel meter at the 6.4. And then the other thing that we talk about is we have current transformer set up. So if you have multiple heat pumps, you probably want to look at that style of wiring so that you can put multiple circuits on 1 meter easier. If you have any questions about how that works, please talk to us later. This is on the back of that rebate cheat sheet. Anytime you're calling, requesting a checkout, please kind of have this list verified beforehand. Verify that all the meters are installed and they're on the exterior of the building. We do not want our low control receivers or meters on the inside of the building, and that's, you can understand people are not home, or if they are home, they might not answer the door. It's hard to get into people's houses these days, and I'm sure you guys know too. So this equipment needs to be on the outside of the house. It needs to be wired ahead of time, needs a 240 volt power source to it, needs to be available for us to turn on at time of checkout. Verify that the equipment going on the program is controlled. Verify that the circuits that are on the CT wiring system are going through the CT properly and to the correct CT, because I've been to situations where you've got multiple meters out there for different things. Make sure you've got the right circuits going to the right meters and CTs. If jurisdiction requires, depending on what you're doing, that inspection's done prior to us coming and sealing up the equipment, make sure that's taken care of before you call us for checkout. Any questions?
I'm going to mention that.
Sure. Yep. So like our water heater program that has is non-metered, has a low control receiver on it. our air source heat pumps that are on the quick cash program, our peak shave, those are all, you guys don't have to have your electrician wire those. We have a contractor that'll go out and put those low control, the DR receivers on for them. So if you got a question about that, give us a call too. But when people submit rebates, we can have a contractor go out, put the load management switch on for them. So, yes.
A question for Robin, I think it's for Robin. On your ECM rebate, is that only for like a replacement motor, or is that if you put in a new furnace with an ECM, you get the rebate?
It has to be a replacement.
Okay,
So if you're installing a new furnace, it doesn't qualify for, because it's supposed to be an increase in efficiency. So the new one should already be efficient. This is increasing efficiency, so it would be a replacement.
thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, we just want to thank you for coming. Our partnership with you guys is super important. We appreciate you taking the time today to come and refresh and get some additional training from the air source heat pump. We're going to bring Jordan up, and are we going to take a little break in between? Do you all need a little break? Yeah. We can do that, and then we'll bring her up, and then we'll come back with we'll come back in. Jordan, how much time?
I mean, we're close to 7:50, so we want to just do 8.
Okay, why don't y'all come back at 8? A little housekeeping, if you help yourselves to the refreshments in the refrigerators as well. The bathrooms are out here to the left. If you need anything, anybody in a blue jacket works at Wright-Hennepin. We can certainly help you with any questions that you have. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. It's okay. That was
That's because I think that Douglas is not. Yeah, for sure. I don't think they want to, which yeah.
You come back and only get 4.
That's what I mean.
Let's wait and see after Thursday.
Yeah. Yeah, or at least put the ones that don't require,
Right.
and then like that $400 ones that don't
Yeah,
rain, right?
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Why don't you come to this? Right, yeah. Here's how you travel. Pretty good odds, pretty good odds. I don't know why, but yeah.
Yes.
I'll take a box and
Everyone always says, wow, I'm in
So I'll just go through the list of preferred contractors for ground so the utility areas work area.
I was sitting back, you know me.
How things going over there?
Thanks, yeah, how you been? Mark? Mark. Oh, yeah.
Anyhow, we're doing.
Well, it's on the board on there.
Yeah.
Because we
Okay.
basically.
No, he's there.
No. Yeah, he I thought he was. So I didn't forward this meeting notice to him. And then I texted him on the way here, he's like, shoot, I'm not on the list. I'm like, we'll get you on the list, so. Yeah. There's the next month. Install this,
Yeah, 45.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. That's easy on the board.
Exciting. So you've seen me talk all my times
It let us apply.
I have the little house, yeah, they do that.
Hi, how are you, Jordan? How are you? Good to see you. Thank you.
Decision, you don't have.
Exactly. Exactly, totally different. One doesn't rely on the other. Yeah, no problem. You gotta take that, yeah. Exactly. For sure, yeah. Hey Grant, nice to see you. Been a long time. Oh my gosh, I was trying to remember the last time we saw each other. I don't remember where it was. Yeah, that's true. So,
If you're too far away, that's why.
different kind of trouble. Yeah. Yeah, I got in my 30 years in Excel, and I'm like, I had that retirement program, getting police desired, and then I came to work for our steel, so.
Is there a hole in the office in particular or something? Just throw a name. Good. Well, and I'm just more excited.
I don't know, I'm not like, I can't visualize it.
Yeah. Probably squeeze the same union out of us if you wanted it.
Hi, good morning. Yeah.
I was with those, we're going to see why. I came out here, but then that was still the old building. This building's got developed. Reach out anytime.
Both gas tanks are cheaper in terms
Yeah, because that,
Pretty well stated.
Andrew Rose has all these nice days to schedule this.
so it's kind of a 30-year.
And Andrew is really nice to
Sounds like what? Yeah.
Rental with a rooftop unit.
Well, it is for the last 2 months. You pick today or tomorrow.
Let's go there after this.
50 gallons is enough to get. And then there's a $200 rebate, whether it's the same or not. Just can't be as smart.
All you gotta do is call the maintenance.
We can't control it, kind of like
You did. Well, he won't give us any of the first
I think
Jimmy? No, thank
we're not selling the water. We've had that's been around for a long time.
It's been a long time.
These guys are
The metal, like, ladder coming down the outside of the building.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I've been through this a few times.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, good to see you.
So, I'm gonna grab some.
I'm Robin.
Nice to meet you.
Like, set my 7-foot ladder up, and then that gets me right to the bottom of it. But it's like oh, is it? Around the ladder, so like, carry the tools up. Tools like, yeah, like catch.
So if it's a furnace.
You gotta get 4 filters up there, which I think are 20. Because you can't carry them up the shelf.
The PSC motors that used to come.
If the wind's blowing the wrong way, I'm screwed, because there ain't no way of getting filters. Right.
I know it's free money, but I'm just saying you're giving away money you don't need to. I'm surprised the state doesn't.
Should see if they've got a system to control my stock tank heaters.
Yeah, I know what you're up against and what you're dealing with. So. It's good to meet you. For sure. Yeah.
Heated base, water, heater in each tank.
At least you still some of this stuff.
Yes.
The common tank between the horses and mine's like a big galvanized trough. It's about the size of this table. That keeps it pretty warm. When I cycle mine, 30 minutes on, 30 minutes off.
Okay, can everyone hear me through the mic okay? Is it coming through? Can I test if I turn my head different ways? Everyone hearing me all right?
Yes.
Cool, thank you. Give me just a second here to get finally set up and we can get started. So just do a couple minutes, and I know that I was told that they are brewing more coffee, so that will be available soon. It is ready, awesome. right. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing well today. Thank you for having me. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Jordan Pervins, and I'm here with the Center for Energy and Environment. So I'm here to talk about air source heat pumps with the Minnesota Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative. And so jumping right in to explain what the collaborative is this is a statewide initiative dedicated to advancing the adoption of energy-efficient air source heat pumps. So we work alongside utilities, distributors, manufacturers, contractors, all of you, to work on providing resources, training, and up-to-date information for you to help accelerate the market for air source heat pump adoption. And so some additional value from attending today's training is, one, you can earn NATE CEUs. And just a note on this, since we had the separate sign up, we will just be sending a follow-up email to collect those NATE CEU numbers. So if you do have that accreditation and you want to make sure you get credit, we'll be sending something out after the fact to capture that. So if you have any questions on that. Next is you are earning energy skilled recognition for heat pump comfort advising for your company. I'll explain a little bit more about what that is on the next slide. And then finally, this training does fulfill the requirement for the Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative's preferred contractor network. And then one thing that I can't put on the slide yet officially, but this training will satisfy the HVAC contractor requirement for training for Save Energy Minnesota or the IRA programs. So looking at the Here and Homes programs coming through the state later this year, this training will satisfy one of the HVAC contractor requirements. So you being here today will automatically be able to check that off. So can't be too official with what I share out until we have better documentation, but just wanted to let you know that that's another piece of value that you're getting out of today. And so looking at energy skilled recognition, so this is really a partnership with Google to help highlight contractors that have quality training. So essentially when you have this energy skilled recognition, we'll submit this to PNNL, they work with Google, and then your business profile will be updated with this little energy skilled recognition tag. So people can hover over that to see that that's the credential that you have, and then it will list the number of staff at your company that have that designation. So beyond this, we're still trying to figure out kind of other ways that you can get value out of this, if there's any certain badges or logos that you can put on your materials for energy skilled recognition, but it is a pretty new program, so right now it's really just that Google search boost. And so jumping back in, our goal as the Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative is to establish heat pumps as the preferred option for both customers and contractors when they're looking to upgrade their home heating and cooling system. And so taking a quick look at why Minnesota is transforming the market with air source heat pumps, why do we care around the state? So why are utilities focused on heat pump technology? So utilities and the state want energy savings to meet our goals. And so heat pump technology offers a really strong solution for this because there's a very high energy savings potential, demonstrated cold climate performance, which is very important here, especially now that we're having more of a real winter this year as opposed to last. And then there are also lots of valuable customer benefits and a lot of opportunity with the dual fuel applications to help reduce that peak demand, as was mentioned a bit earlier today. And so our focus with our program is on dual fuel applications. So, we're always supportive of all electric for when the situation makes sense and the customer's interested and can handle that upfront cost, but we completely understand that dual fuel is really the most approachable solution to help increase heat pump adoption. For natural gas customers, you're able to have that fuel choice flexibility. Depending on your utility, there may be rates that help you actually save on operational costs with natural gas. Not always the case, but that is an option. And then for delivered fuel customers, there's very tangible operational cost savings that can really decrease that payback period for the increased upfront investment. When you're thinking propane, I learned that there's more fuel oil than I thought in northern Minnesota recently. Those customers are going to be able to save a lot by switching to an air source heat pump. And so looking at the trend in the market, so first we're looking at a view of a contractor survey that we did over the last couple years. So over half of the surveyed contractors saw an increase in ducted heat pump sales in the last few years. I guess out of this room, raise your hand if you would agree with that. Have you seen an increase? Yeah? Awesome. And then the next here to highlight is that over 70% of these surveyed contractors expected ducted heat pump sales to increase over the next 5 years. And then again, raise your hand if you agree with that. Yeah, see some head shakes though too, because there's a lot changing with the landscape, incentives that are available, rates that are available, and I know that really understanding that full upfront cost picture for your customers is critical to being able to sell more air source heat pumps. So thank you. All right. And then I did want to pull this in. This is fairly new from some data that we put together from our State of the Market report, but looking at customer market trends, I thought that this one was really interesting. So on the graph here, I know the text might be a little bit small, but see in this very dark blue, these customers wanted a heat pump before they started their search. Sorry, I should preface, every single customer surveyed has a heat pump installed. And so we wanted to understand if they went in wanting one or if they were relying on their contractor to make that recommendation. And so at the very top here, that's 2022, we can see that more customers who ended up getting a heat pump went in with the intention of having one installed. And then as time goes on to 2023, 2024, we can see that less and less of them are going in with that intention. But the red box is saying, I was not specifically looking for one, but my contractor suggested one. So you can just kind of see that customer base shifting. So it's less of those early adopters who are aware of the technology beforehand, but it seems like there's a little bit more awareness and that customers are more open to contractor recommendations for heat pump installation. Does that make sense? I know it's probably a little tough to read, but any questions on this? I just thought this was an interesting one to share. All right, so really the reason that we're here to give you this training is we want to give you, near-term value, practical tips to help your business practices and meet your customer expectations. And then longer-term value, increasing your confidence with heat pump installations and sales. You're gonna make higher margins on this equipment and you'll be able to satisfy your customers with with more comfortable solutions for their home. And just to call out here, this training is better with you. I don't want to just talk at you the whole time, so please feel free to stop me. If there are any questions at any point, I will have some pauses for questions. But I'm here to learn from you as well. Every time I give a training, I like learning from everyone in the room. I know that I still have a lot to learn from all of you, so please feel free to share experiences or stop me for questions at any point. And so just looking at this, looking at a future with more heat pumps for customers, looking at that year-round comfort potential, economic solutions in particular for customers with delivered fuels, and then still a practical upgrade for homes with natural gas. And so all of the links and resources that we're going to reference in the training today, they can be found by scanning the QR code on this sheet that I handed out to all of you. So this note sheet, I'm going to be going through a lot of different tools and resources. If you scan this, you'll be able to identify all of them and find them, and they're organized by curriculum section on the website. So, all right, I'm gonna pause here a second to grab some water. Are there any questions on any of the intro stuff? About to get into the fun part, so. All right. So incentive sources and minimizing operational cost. So in this module, we're going to go through the available utility rebates, rates, local programs, financing programs. We really want to help you understand how to refer customers to information about upcoming state and federal incentives and just where they can find different information. Being able to use tools to estimate annual energy costs and runtime of different heat pump applications, and then being able to describe how customers can access and stack available incentives to combine them. So going back to that, I know I showed one bit of data from that customer survey, but another thing that we learned in that same survey, not a surprise, but costs are the most important factor for homeowners. So when considering choosing a new heating system. So we can see the top here, installation costs, so that upfront cost, and then the second, operational cost. So no big surprise, cost is important, and that's why we're gonna focus on this one pretty heavily today. So looking at what incentives are available, so available for most Minnesotans, utility rebates depending on your utility, same thing for special electric rates depending on what's available, also financing options, and then available in specific cities. I know this is more in the metro area, but in case any of you have overlap, there are some local rebate programs that do utility rebate match that can help with that upfront cost piece. And then available later is the Save Energy Minnesota rebates. So this is the IRA programs, the Inflation Reduction Act. So At the federal level, that's those here and homes rebates. I know we've been hearing things about for several years. And then at the state level, we have a state heat pump rebate and electrical panel upgrade grant coming as well as a part of these programs. So I know we haven't talked, oh yeah, go ahead.
Is it happening this year?
If we get our signature. So as an update, I recently changed to a new role. I'm no longer working specifically on the Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative, but we work very closely together. But now I'm on the implementation team as a part of CEE still. So I'm working on these programs. And so I want to be your main point of contact for all of this, take in your feedback, try to make improvements. But as for the timeline, it's a little bit out of our hands right now. I have a little bit more info on here because we are at least able to share more this year, but we just don't have a launch date until we get more from the DOE. So great question. So looking at Save Energy Minnesota, or SEM, so with the initial program launch, the way that this is scoped is that the HERE rebate, state heat pump rebate, and the electrical panel upgrade will be available at program launch. Homes will not be available at that same time because the funding and approvals are in a different place right now. So kind of at launch, we'll have those, and then just more to come on the homes programs. And so when will more information be available? We are publishing a program website, including an interest form later in Q1. This will be happening over the next month or so. We have all of our stuff almost ready to go live. So we want to make sure that we can get you connected with more information, because I know we've been waiting for several years now to hear more about how to participate and what's going on. So there will be an interest form on the website available. This is tailored specifically for contractors. We want you to be able to fill that out, sign up, and then you'll get notifications of any program updates. So when we do have a launch date, when we do have more information we can share. So we're hoping that that can be a helpful way for you to stay plugged in with program updates, because I know it's just been very high level information so far. So the launch date isn't yet finalized, and this is pending DOE approval. Once we do have that approval, we have everything kind of set up in place to be able to share out what the launch date is and kind of what any phased rollout will look like. So fingers crossed we get that soon, but at the very least, we're trying to do as much as we can to prepare everything so that this is as easy and painless as possible, because I know these programs and all the paperwork are always very painful. And so looking at the funding order when we're thinking about these upcoming programs, so this is for customers who have the ability to stack or braid their incentives to get more of the upfront cost reduction between different programs. And so first we have like the fixed and prescriptive incentives, so utility rebates, local rebate match programs, and then next would come the federal incentives. So this is the HERE rebate or the homes rebate once that's available. And then finally would be the state level incentives. This is focused on heat pumps, so just calling out the heat pump rebate program, but this is also where that electrical panel grant would fall in. And so also specifically calling out that these Save Energy Minnesota programs, especially at initial launch, eligibility and rebate amounts will vary based on an applicant's total household income and project cost. Actually, I might skip up and go back, because this is a little more helpful here. So at program launch, we have the HERE and the state heat pump rebates. And so the eligible income blocks are only what's in that purple block. So it'll be available these several rebates will be available for those who are less than 80% AMI or in between 80 and 150% AMI. So if you have any customers who don't qualify based on that income eligibility, they will not qualify for anything coming with initial program launch, but with the homes program, there are rebate amounts available for those who are above 150%. And then just a double check here on AMI, that's the area median income. So it's based on county by household size, and so customers can look at a table to understand if they can estimate their eligibility, but as a part of the program, there will be a pre-qualification process. So we're trying to completely remove your need to ask them about income or qualification at all, because I know it's an uncomfortable conversation, can be tricky with the tax credit, so trying to keep that independent. Yeah, go ahead.
Is that a combined household income, or is that individual?
It is a combined, so
What if just an individual then is the?
It would be a household size of 1, and that's what you'd scan down to their county, and then you could see the 80 or the 80% and 150 and see if they fall below either of those
What
buckets.
if they're not married?
Yeah, it would just be it's
Wow.
it's essentially the people in the
As long as
household.
they're not filing taxes together, kind of,
Yeah.
more or less. Then
Well, it depends because it is the whole household upgrade too. So it would be the number of people living in the house and then the total income that is under that household umbrella, if that makes
So
sense.
marital status doesn't have anything to do with it, or
No,
does
it would
that?
just be number of people and then what the income is combined.
be a hard one to regulate.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go back a little bit. Okay. Yeah, so just calling out that income eligibility, I'll share another note here on just kind of how we're recommending to communicate this to customers, because I know you're probably getting some questions. I know I've heard that from some contractors, so I want to make sure that you can at least point them in the right direction, help them understand what to expect once the programs are launched. And so some notes on equipment eligibility. This is a fun one because most of other programs in our state that we're familiar with do not specifically follow the Energy Star cold climate guidelines. So we're looking at another set of equipment specs for eligibility here, but this is required for both the HERE and state heat pump rebate programs. So I know this is a little bit tricky if we're thinking about utility rebates and which different efficiency measures are required for those and kind of the equipment that you may have been stocking to meet those other programs. Now there's another thing to think about. So I won't pause on this for too long, but if anyone wants to chat about this more and just kind of think about stocking practices and what's going to qualify, please feel free to let me know, find me on a break or after the training. So contractor participation. So all of the Save Energy Minnesota projects must be completed by approved contractors. So what I'm able to share on high-level requirements today, we'll have more of this listed with the website launch later in Q1. But for all contractors, there's just kind of that general documentation and agreements, so your registered business ID, proof of insurance and bonding, any licensing. You will have to complete the SEM onboarding training once that's available, and that's something that we're going to be making available once we have our launch date. And then finally, the payment processing setup, because we do have a third-party partner for the payment processing, so it's kind of outside of the program. And if you get that set up, that's just the way that we can ensure that you're able to get your payment more quickly once projects are complete. And then so by trade, I listed some notes here for HVAC installers. So you'll need to provide a registered and filed mechanical contractor bond, EPA 608 certification for applicable staff, proof of training completion or current standing with accepted programs. And so that last one, that's why this training today does qualify for one of those HVAC contractor requirements. So I can't share too much more detail on this today. This is kind of just the level that I can, but with the website being launched, that's where we'll be able to detail out kind of each requirement step by step so that you can get an idea of what's going to be needed and try to get ahead of it because I know our timeline is still delayed. So communication to customers. So if customers are planning to replace their system, they may ask if they should wait for Save Energy Minnesota to launch. We just recommend pointing them to the area median income table so that they can estimate what money, if any money, they might qualify for to help them make their decision. I know planned replacement isn't as common as replace on fail, so not sure how many customers would particularly be trying to figure out if they should wait or not, but I have heard some questions. So I do have this link here. We will have these slides shared out with you all for you to access. This table is updated annually, but we do not yet have the 2026 table. So just a heads up that it is the 2025 area median income table right now. So those values will probably slightly shift for year over year. All right, and we already looked at this one. I guess I'll pause here though to see, are there any other questions on the Save Energy Minnesota program? I know I can't share too much, but just want to, yeah.
So do you recommend then that the the contractors figure out where they fall in, or are you hoping that the client will know where they are first, and then how do you expect that to happen?
Yeah, so because this is something that I know we've run into with the tax credit, trying to figure out if your customers have tax liability and if you can recommend that as an upfront cost reduction. But you want to avoid having to ask them about their income, their financial situation to determine their eligibility. Awkward conversation. So that's kind of why I'm trying to say if you can point your customers to go look at this table, they can check their income, they can individually decide and help understand if they will qualify, then that just, kind of removes the contractor from the picture and needing to know that information to determine eligibility. So. Any other questions? All right. Okay, so on our website with the Minnesota Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative, we do have a utility rebate finder tool. So this, you can look up rebates by application type, minimum efficiency specs, and then direct links to each individual utility rebate page. So this is just on our website, on our tool. You can type in the provider name. This can just be helpful as a quick reference for understanding which different rebates are available, especially if you're working in multiple utility service territories. And then calling out here for financing, there are some statewide loans available through the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, and they are administered by CEE. So we have the Home Energy Loans and Fix Up Fund. You can find direct links to this page from your training resources page, but also available here if you're interested in checking it out later on. And then again, everything that I've said, everything that I will say following, this can all be found on our website. So direct links on your training page, as well as if you want to access by going back through slide deck after the fact. And so going into operational costs and rates, so we're going to share examples for Great River Energy and Xcel Energy. And then as Robin mentioned earlier, the available rate reductions or credits will vary by cooperative served by GRE. We're just kind of looking at the broader picture. We will look at some dual fuel rate examples, but we just want to emphasize, make sure to check on what's available depending on the service territory that you're working within because they're all a little bit different. And so first, just getting an operational cost view to help us understand, for natural gas customers versus propane customers, and then understanding based on that switchover temperature for a dual fuel solution, is there an opportunity for operational cost savings? So looking at our first example here, this is natural gas with the standard electric rate. This is using just kind of statewide averages with GRE data. So on the far left side here, we're looking at annual costs, and we can see that the first on the far left, that's your furnace and AC baseline, about $1,600 a year. And then we go to a dual fuel system. So this is a heat pump installed with a furnace and different switchover temperatures. So as you move left to right, we have switchover at 15, 30, and 45. And then on the far right, we have all electric. So if you have natural gas and you chose to go to all electric, that is what your new annual operating cost would be. And so a few things to call out here. This isn't too surprising. Natural gas is cheap. We see those higher switchover temperatures as being more beneficial for operational cost unless there are special rates available. But it is still, you are able to save some money there. And I think, being able to talk about that future flexibility is really helpful for customers at this point too. It's like, it's not going to be a big sell on that operational cost because, you're going to get what? $100 a year here, but you can really talk about that future flexibility. Just with natural gas rates being a little bit more volatile and susceptible to different things going on and electric rates being more stable. I know I've talked to some people who were very glad that they had a heat pump through some of the spikes we've seen on and off over the past several years. So in this case, I want to talk a little bit about sizing too before we get to that section. But just kind of understanding from the cost picture and the opportunity here, it's most economical to size closer to the cooling load with this system. As it stands right now, unless there's a special rate or something changes, we don't want to size this heat pump to take on a ton of that heating load because it does get more expensive as that switchover temperature gets lower. So does this make sense to everyone? Any questions? All right. Okay, let's look at propane. How many of y'all do installations in propane territory? Hands, cool, awesome. So looking here on the far left again, annual operating cost for your baseline furnace and AC. And then for dual fuel, it kind of goes the other way now. As the switchover temperature gets lower, it does get cheaper to operate the system just because of how much cheaper it is to run on electric versus propane in this
What are you
case.
pricing your furnace propane gas at per pound?
It's a 203 a gallon. And I know, yeah, it's a little wonky because I know depending on the time of year, how that can change too for fuel delivery. So that is just kind of an average aggregated over a couple of years and taking into account that seasonal fluctuation. But yeah, $2.03 a gallon.
You should find a graph that shows like, say, $1.20 and then $2.50 and then say,
Mm-hmm.
that would make a better comparison so people can look at that, so I can show that to a customer and say, okay, what are you paying for your propane right now?
Yep.
And then I can show them their savings, because if you're going based on an average, you know, it may not show a true benefit to the customer.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I can have a graph with numbers a little more separated, that I can say, hey, you could save a heck of a lot more if it is $3 a gallon, or I've seen it, you know, I'm a propane customer, $4.10 a gallon. And at that point, you really start pinching your pennies because you don't want to fill up. But
No, that's a great call out. And I will say this is just kind of a general average tool. We have a bunch of assumptions about the equipment and rates. But in a later section, I think it'll be one of the last sections, but in controls, I'm going to go through a little bit of math for how we can actually calculate the economic balance point. Like at what point does it become more expensive to run the heat pump? And so you can play around with the individual propane rates and then see kind of what that operational cost opportunity is. So I'm not going to skip all the way ahead because I have to go through like a lot of slides, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But great question, thank you. All right, any questions or thoughts on this one again, looking at propane? Yeah, so here we're looking, you know, as it gets cheaper, as the switchover temperature gets lower, it is most economical to size closer to the heating load in this case. Another note here, I'll revisit this probably 50 times today, but this is where variable speed systems can be really valuable, because if we can save money by sizing closer to the heating load, we really want to make sure that we're not oversized for cooling in that case, which is really easy to do given the difference between our heating and cooling loads in Minnesota. So being able to choose a variable speed system that can modulate does open up that opportunity to size it a little bit larger without as much of a risk for being oversized for cooling and risking that short cycling. Yeah, I'll say that, as I said, probably 50 more times, but just calling it out here to kick us off. All right. And then I do have some Excel examples in here because I know there's some territory overlap. I guess how many of y'all have customers in Excel territory? Cool, awesome. So looking at Excel, this is with natural gas and the electric space heating rate. And I will jump into the electric space heating rate in a little bit more detail if there are any questions. But showing here, this is using that special rate that's available from Excel if you do have a heat pump installed. And so in this case, looks pretty similar to the other natural gas. You know, we're not quite as high overall, just given some of the changes for Excel, but you know, we're seeing that 30-degree switchover temperature be a little bit more favorable than the 15 degrees here. So the electric space heating rate does help make all electric systems much more viable in this case with that $1,700 annual operating cost. But in the case of heat pump installations for dual fuel, this is where we'd recommend sizing closer to that cooling load again. And so if we look at Excel with propane, which I know is not the most common, but I've seen it in some cases, but with the electric space heating rate, you can see how much more favorable that reduction is in your operational cost compared to your baseline of 2,700. And then, you know, as we go down, as the heat pump takes on more of that heating load, it is cheaper for operational cost, and we can see about $1,000 annual cost reduction here. So just another note on delivered fuel, and then, you know, as was brought up too, depending on what that propane cost could be, that could be even more significant, or it could be less depending on that fluctuation and when they're having their fuel delivered. Okay, so the electric space heating rate. How many of y'all are familiar with this? Got some hands, okay. I'm just gonna go through this, but please feel free to stop me if there are any questions. I just wanna make sure that everyone is aware so that their customers can take advantage of this. So This is available for both all electric and dual fuel systems. Right now, the requirement for dual fuel is that over 50% of those heating hours need to be served by electric. So the heat pump needs to serve over 50% of those heating load hours. This is defined as the primary heating source, so it is kind of confusing. There have been some issues with customers calling saying, hey, I got a heat pump installed. They ask, okay, is it your primary heating source? And they'll say, well, no, I still have a furnace, and then they're not able to get on the rate, even if they do have that switchover temperature around the 35 degrees or below. Yeah, Maggie.
I'll add to that, as of last week, the PUC actually changed the rules for Excel. And this just came out, like, I don't even know if it's published yet. But the PUC is requiring that contractors actually designate on some enrollment form if the heat pump would be the primary heating source, or if the primary heating source is electric. So if you install a system that will operate at or below 35 degrees, you can mark that primary heating source, and then they'll get on this great rate. They're trying to make auto enrollment easier so that folks don't have this issue with getting on the beneficial rate.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's changing like as of last week. I don't actually know when it's mandated to go into effect. I think they have 90 days.
That sounds right, I think, from the last meeting.
Yeah.
It's actually filed. So that is really good to hear, because we've been hearing most issues about the call center and being able to get through. So thank you, Maggie. Hopefully that auto enrollment will make it easier for your customers to take advantage of this. So yeah, and then finally, this does reduce the electric rate during the heating season, October through May. One thing that's a little tricky here is not tricky, it's a good thing. It's tricky to model. We do not require another meter, any separate meter. This rate applies to your whole home electric use, October through May, which currently right now with some of our modeling, we don't have the best way to take that into account just because there's so many nuances home to home. But I know that this is something that we're trying to better model for customers, because right now we're really just showing the tangible operational cost benefits for the heat pump and the energy usage of that. But looking at the whole house, it probably would make that operational cost case a little bit nicer even for natural gas when it's applying to that whole home electric. And so electric space heating rate, how can my customers enroll? I know, yeah, Maggie, as you said, this is likely changing with now you as the contractor being able to mark whether that is the primary heating source to help with auto enrollment. But as it stands right now is you call Excel customer service, request a billing referral rate change, and then they would ask specifically for the electric space heating rate. It's not an all electric rate. It's not, there's a lot of like very slightly different names. They've been pretty clear on needing to say exactly the electric space heating rate. And then if you're unable to receive help at the call center, we recommend requesting an energy efficiency agent to help with your request. Obviously, with what Maggie said, hopefully the need for that in this process will reduce over time once that can be a little bit more automatic. But at least that's here for reference for anything in the meantime. Are there any questions here, or anyone have anything to share from their experience with the space heating rate? Not seeing? Okay. Well, we will keep moving. Oh, okay. So just talking a little bit more about rates, we're going to look at this just in a slightly different view and call out the opportunity for dual fuel rates. So here that we're still looking at our baseline, natural gas, furnace, and AC, and then we're actually going to look at a 15 degree switchover temperature in this case, because we're kind of comparing that standard electric rate and dual fuel rate. And so we can see the 15 degree switchover, if you go to dual fuel and you have the standard rate, that's going to be a little bit more expensive year over year. But with the dual fuel rate, that's where you can, you're able to realize some more of those operational cost savings. So this is just kind of looking at this a different way, because I know we didn't pull in the dual fuel rate to look at those other graphs. And so another example, looking at propane here. This one I always love looking at because, wow, we have a pretty significant reduction even with that standard rate and a 15 degree switchover temperature, but that dual fuel rate just even more dramatically increases that operational cost savings potential. And then just looking at Excel, another view. These ones aren't too different from the graph here, so honestly, we'll just, kind of cruise here. Still have that $1,000 difference. And there's the $2.03 a gallon for propane. It's actually on this slide, so. All right. And I will not spend too much time on the dual fuel rates with the load management compatibility. I know this was mentioned before and that you all have that flyer. The handout that was mentioned earlier for this load management compatibility. We do have the compatible products list hosted on our website. So just trying to build that out more so that you have an easy resource where you can go check and make sure that equipment is verified to be compatible with these programs, because I know there's some confusion depending on the controls and what's allowed, depending on equipment models, manufacturer. And so just trying to be a nice library for you to reference so that you have confidence in the solutions and options that you're selling to your customers. And so this compatible products list, this is on our website, but if you scan that training resources and check it out later, it'll be listed there as well with a direct link. Yeah, I guess, Rodney, did you have anything you wanted to say on?
No, you covered it really well. We're excited to see more units that are compatible with two-wire relay systems. We're trying to do our best to work with manufacturers as we can. Happy to talk to anyone more about that if needed afterwards.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so just to close out this section, we're just going to look at some charts of heat pump operating hours. Sorry, I keep accidentally putting my hair on the mic. So I really like looking at these because I think it can help emphasize how big of a shoulder season we have in Minnesota. You know, we always think about the really cold days, but there's a lot of opportunity for kind of these mild temperatures where we still need heating, but we're not getting to the super cold weather. So the reason I bring this up is to think about, you know, if we're thinking natural gas scenario, not a ton of operational cost benefit, sure, we have that future fuel flexibility depending on how rates change, but this is also saving your furnace from a lot of short cycling hours. If we think about needing to size our furnaces to serve the heating loads on those super cold days, I mean, they're always oversized for the mild heating that we need at higher outdoor ambient temperatures. Even if you have modulating, gosh, I read this really cool study, and I think it was they had a modulating 96% efficient furnace, and it was, you know, it was oversized by a fair bit for this house, but it still needed to be at that size to meet those super cold temperatures. And I think it was short cycling all the way down to, it was either 20 or 15 degrees outdoor ambient temperature because of how large that furnace had to be sized to meet those super cold temps. This was a little bit further north in the example, so I know the design temperature was a bit lower. I think it was a 60 kBTU or 60,000, but yeah, if we look at, you know, this is the 45-degree switchover temperature, this is the 30, and that's the 15. And I mean, even if we have that high switchover temperature, because we don't have the best operational cost case, that's a lot of load hours in a year that you're taking off of your furnace from short cycling, helping increase the longevity of that equipment. So does that concept kind of make sense to everyone? I know this isn't brought up as much as some other benefits for heat pumps, but I just really like looking at the load hours here to understand that benefit. It is a little bit harder to directly communicate to customers in, you know, the most understandable way, but it's just another way to look at the investment in a heat pump system. All right, so went over some available programs, some information that's coming up and how you can stay connected, and kind of looking at how customers can access and stack. I know we didn't go through any, you know, super in-depth examples here, but we do have everything listed on our website, organized by category, keeping that always up to date with different programs that are available. So our team is here to support you. I would say, you know, we're very tied in to the incentive and cost landscape. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. So we can help you make sure that you can get your customers connected with the maximum benefits. All right. I'm going to do this next section, and then we'll take a break, if that sounds good to everyone. We'll see how long this takes. Okay. So looking at homeowner education, so we're going to look at different customer perceptions and priorities, a little bit of a look back at that survey data to understand how we can message and build customer confidence in heat pump systems, building trust in your expertise by addressing key items throughout that sales and installation process, and then giving your customers valuable education so that they're comfortable and satisfied heat pump owners. You know, they know what to expect. That's a little bit different than what they're used to. So looking first at what do customers want from their HVAC system. So we did this survey. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but here's the numbers if you'd like it. But we saw the cost. Costs are the top 2 priorities, again. And then the next things here are same and better comfort, better indoor air quality, or same or better lifespan. So these were also some of the responses from customers for those top 5 priorities. You know, cost is still the clear winner here, but this can be really helpful for you to understand what are customers also looking for that you can turn around into key selling points for heat pump systems. And so kind of looking at a summary here, you know, customers really want those economical solutions with competitive upfront costs, incentives in financing, operational cost savings opportunities, and then quality equipment, being able to get that better temperature consistency and balance around home with longer run times with a heat pump, less temperature fluctuation around the set point, better indoor air quality, and then just better system reliability and durability, helping with that furnace load hour reduction. And so looking at this summary, we're not trying to say to completely change and overhaul your sales process for heat pumps, but just looking at how you can make simple modifications to what you're already doing for AC systems. And then based on what that customer is looking for and their priorities, just see how you can help solve either existing problems or just needs or desires that they don't currently have that a heat pump solution may better be able to serve over an AC. And so we have a bunch of information on our website, messaging guides, resources. This is all research-backed. We also have a bunch of white-labeled templates and marketing materials that are just available for you to rebrand and use. So this you can find from your training page. I won't spend too much time on it right now, but just letting you all know that this is available, and these can be really helpful to just kind of make that conversation easier. All right, so how can you be a trusted source of information and increase your customers' confidence in your expertise? And so I just want to call out here that your voice is very important. This is one of our report metrics that was source of information that participants trust. So top, friends and family, not too surprising, then utility, and then my contractor. And so you know, customers are looking to you to be a knowledgeable go-to resource when they're trying to learn more about what they should have installed and why. So just kind of sharing this to help increase your confidence in being able to provide solutions to your customers. And so a great way to do this and increase their confidence is just being familiar with the incentive landscape and being able to describe, you know, what rates are available, what upfront cost reductions are available, and then kind of just showing them, you know, as we're looking at a bid lineup or we're looking at good, better, best, and then we're comparing some upfront cost reductions, you know, just being able to talk through that in a way that they can easily understand so they can understand the potential investment. And so here, this is new. We have this new tool. It is officially, what were we saying, Maggie, like soft launched at this point. So it is available on our website to play around with. We do have some key updates coming soon, but I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with our cost of heat comparison tool that we used to have on our website. The goal of this is to essentially replace that with a more homeowner-friendly tool. So they can actually go through and kind of select a lot more detail about their home. You're actually able to input load calculations if they have that information from a contractor, or you as a contractor wants to walk through that with them step by step. There's better diversity in the represented utilities because I know we had a more limited list with our old cost tool that we were keeping updated. And then you can personalize rates and kind of make any individual tweaks with the level of detail that you're comfortable with. So if I go to the next one, this is kind of an example of an output of the tool. I know this is a little bit small, but you kind of get your baseline total cost estimate, simplified switchover options, and then understanding what your cost and energy savings estimates are. And so this is more tailored to specific homes when you put in your information versus looking at, you know, a more broad operational cost comparison. So this is really just intended to be more friendly towards homeowners, help them actually more tangibly understand the benefits that they can get by having a heat pump installed. Are there any questions on this? If we have time on a break or as a part of another section, I was planning to kind of pull this up and do a little walkthrough of it at some point, if anyone's interested. So, Maggie, was there anything you wanted to share on this? Cool. Yeah, so just a few quick notes on just what's coming next. We're just adding more electric utilities around the state. We're going to add or refresh some of the education components to help people understand just like, oh, what does this thing mean? What am I selecting? How do I figure this out? Because with all the different rate structures available, it can be confusing. And then the rates will be updated annually, and then there will be additional tool embed instructions so that this tool is able to be embedded on other websites as a key resource for customers, for other organizations to use. So, all right. So it's really important, kind of jumping back into educating your customers and engaging them throughout the process. It's really important to make sure that you have these regular touch points and that you're understanding where their priorities are at and if these have shifted or changed. So like initial conversation, understanding that incentive landscape, rates, what current pain points do they have, how can a heat pump solution address these priorities? You know, looking at the bid lineup proposal, kind of the trade-offs with upfront cost, operational cost, comfort, equipment longevity and lifespan, you know, looking at things like equipment location and kind of what different advantages the system can offer. And then through installation, you know, making sure that that spot is agreed upon. I know that with a heat pump, we have a few more different things to think about with where that equipment should be placed. And sometimes it's hard to find an ideal location. It's like you don't want this in a walkway, but you don't want it next to a window either. So I know this can be a little bit more fun with a heat pump to have that conversation. And then helping them understand what to expect from controls. You know, maybe we talked about the operational cost requirements and switchover earlier on, but helping to make sure that they understand at installation how everything is going to interact. And then how should they control their heat pump and auxiliary heat? Is it all set and good to go? Can they do setbacks? Should they do really deep setbacks? Helping them understand that. And then just being able to go through the work that you completed as well. Always valuable, pretty standard across the board, not just heat pumps. So going through a few of those customer education pieces, you know, so what's different about living with a heat pump? Longer run times. A lot of times people think longer run times means more expensive. It's really helpful to be upfront with customers and help them understand that that is not the case with a heat pump. You know, they operate more effectively and efficiently over those longer run times, which is cheaper from an operational cost standpoint versus that start-stop operation. Lower supplier temperatures. This is a tricky one. You know, we're all used to that really toasty warm air coming out from the furnace, from your registers in the morning. I know I still have a furnace. It was nice this morning. My heat pump probably, if I had one, it probably wouldn't have been able to heat last night anyway. But this is something that I think not being upfront about it can be a lot more damaging. I've heard a lot of stories of people kind of skirting around this, saying like, oh, the heat pump will supply your heat, but the customers aren't expecting that delivered air from their registers to feel colder, and so they're like, what's going on? Is it even heating? It feels cold. You know, because a lot of times that's exactly what it feels like when it's that warm air temperature versus the toasty hot air. So just helping them understand up front that this is something they can expect. And then maybe, you know, as we're considering controls, this is something where instead of a switchover temperature, maybe we look at a supplier temperature sensor. And if they're caring more about comfort, above all, maybe that supplier temperature sensor can help you change the switchover based around when they're comfortable versus just purely based on, you know, the economic picture here. So defrost cycles. This is a good one. I saw a system a few weeks ago. I went on site, tried to figure out what was wrong, and was not defrosting at all. We had a nice big ice chunk built up in the outside condenser, and I asked the customers about it, and they're like, I don't even know what that is. And I was like, have you seen it release steam, be a little bit louder for these cycles? And they're like, I haven't seen or heard any of that, and they've been pretty plugged in trying to figure out what's going on. So that's an example, but it's really helpful to make sure that your customers know what to expect from defrost and also that it should be happening, especially at those colder outdoor ambient temperatures. So in this case, I know depending on the time of year that you install the system, I've been recommended by contractors, like if you can force it into defrost, if it's the right time of year, great way to show them what to expect. If you can't, just being able to like pull up a video and show them, okay, so unit's gonna release some steam, it's gonna be a little bit loud, and it's gonna switch back to normal operation. That is a really great way to help the customer understand what to expect and also not to think that something's wrong, resulting in a callback too. So defrost, always a good one. And then reduce setbacks. I think I have, yeah, next slide here. So going to controls. So this is looking at setbacks. You know, we talk a lot about the set it and forget it. Just leave it, don't touch it. It's going to modulate, maintain the set point. That's the most effective way for heat pumps to run, is if they can just have those longer run times, maintaining a set point. If you're doing really deep setbacks at night, you're going to want to change that thermostat to have a higher set point much earlier than you typically need to with a furnace, you know, if you want the heat pump to be able to recover so you're actually warm when you get up in the morning. So this is a little bit tricky because I don't always want to say full set it and forget it. You know, if you're gone on vacation for a long time, or maybe someone had a heat pump installed at the cabin and they're only there here and there, I think those are great opportunities for those setbacks and just helping them be aware, like before you plan to be here again, just make sure that you give it quite a while to catch back up. Because I think a lot of times customers do, you know, pretty aggressive setbacks, like what we're used to with a furnace and AC, and then they're like, okay, it's freezing, go change to emergency heat to my furnace so I can actually get up and start my day, and then it's in emergency heat mode all winter and the heat pump's no longer supporting that heating load. So just helping them understand, you know, we don't have to be 100% set it and forget it unless they prefer that, but I know a lot of customers, even more and more, every year want to have that super discrete, tight control over their scheduling, their set points, and kind of everything connected with their thermostat and being able to access it from their phone too. So, all right. Next, looking at how the heat pump will interact with the auxiliary heat. So switch over temperature. You know, if we're looking at ductless systems, hydronic, all electric, there are other staggered controls options. We won't go into these in too much detail because we're focused mostly on ducted dual fuel applications, but just calling these things out depending on the different types of installations you may be doing. And so helping them understand how they can maintain their heat pump. So really important, snow removal. You have to clear snow outside of your air conditioner in the winter. Why would I have to do that now? So helping customers understand that the airflow cannot be obstructed around the system, otherwise it's not going to run effectively. It's going to be harder for it to even defrost and keep itself going. So just helping them understand the importance of snow removal around the unit. Filter replacement, kind of just as standard across the board, not even heat pump specific. Same thing here with service scheduling, but just helping them understand what different maintenance and those practices, how they can help increase longevity and not result in issues. Because I've heard of a lot of issues with some of this stuff not being set up properly. Had another lack of defrost issue. Call came in last week, and it was because there was so much snow built up around the unit. And it wasn't even the amount, it was just because the wind had blown it, just based on where the system was placed, and the homeowner didn't know that they had to keep it completely clear. So I used to make the joke that that wasn't very important, because the last 2 winters we haven't had that much snow, but it's relevant again, so. Okay, so what utility bill changes can they expect? So I'm not gonna go through the whole picture again, but essentially just the misconception that can happen. You know, they're expecting operational cost savings, you know, depending on what you've gone through, what their auxiliary fuel type is, increased electric bills, decreased gas or delivered fuel bills. And sometimes they're like, well, my electric bill went up, like this is terrible. And it's just, you know, helping them understand that it's the full picture of your bills and you will actually have that cost savings across the board. I just know I've heard some stories of that misconception as well. So just making sure that yes, overall on your energy use, you are going to be saving money, but that anticipated electric bill increase is a helpful reminder. And just a final call out here, you know, friends and family are the most trusted source of information from that market survey we completed. So happy, well-educated homeowners are your best salespeople. You know, they're gonna help get you connected to new leads through their connections and network if they have a good experience and feel well-educated and prepared to live with a heat pump. All right, so we went through different perceptions, priorities, some key messaging, some key items to talk about throughout that full sales and installation process, and then making sure that the customer is educated to ensure comfort and satisfaction, and making sure that they just know what's going on if the system does go into defrost, or if it does actually snow and we need to remove that. So we are at, oh, sorry, 8:56. Do we want to do about a 10-minute break, come back around 9:05? Cool, thank you.
On general.
The worst time to ask this question, but if I don't have any answers.
The ask to advocate today is to bring information to how many people on it.
Oh, really?
What is the space available? So we originally started talking about the opportunities.
But this one has
So I think, yeah.
Well, and the number of following.
Yes, exactly.
So this last.
Yeah.
Been in there a while.
Good yourself. Yep. Okay. So are you the main, what's their main point of contact?
Wasn't the actual source.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Oh, can you please send that to me? That sounds great.
Oh, yeah. Tom, is Tom the great trained engineer? Brother worked so now you could come in late, right?
I did come in late.
Yeah, so,
And some are,
yeah, yeah. Oh, God. You're fine if you
Mine's
get
the
away.
following, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it did. Exactly.
I still remember that time.
yeah.
I don't think it is. We should,
That's what, that's the.
that is a good question.
had a temporary shelter.
We haven't cross-referenced them recently. I've one time
And stuff.
We should, I think it would be good to.
Put that in the response. Do you have the Sun Belt
I don't think I'm like thinking about it, I think I saw it.
Cut the line, slap them all around. I told everyone in that room, I said, you gotta get out of here. And I told my electricians that they were gonna stay. And I start raising like they're just
Like I was Googling.
should have a full fresh air mask, yeah.
Sorry, girlfriend.
Oh, you're fine. Buddy was there with me, and he's holding me. Gonna have the house open for raising my gas. I got it all raised up, the electrician, the plumber, they ran on at some point. And then, when we could go back in there the rest of the night, so bad, and it kept just hitting out customers. We sat out in our van for like 2.5 hours, just come out, touch the tube. You know, it's like,
We don't do that. Yeah, we didn't want to do that, we just wanted to get it done, like, but it was 9 months ago that we did it. Could I have returned it? I mean, come on, yeah, but they chose that, so I had to write it up at the end of the So I think there's yeah, so I think some also like these yeah, it's good to see you. Oh, yeah, yeah. They're like street science. They're done. Right. So it's okay. I said the day that they're there.
Got like 10 more ideas.
That stuff, I spray that out in my plots. That stuff's all over.
Yeah, super fast. So anyway.
Good, now I got out of
When
that.
the farmer sprays his crop
Right.
like this too, right off my
Right.
It was so siloed that, you know, you could all use stuff.
My uncle, my mom's brother was the farmer, like, a month away that had all that acreage, sprayed some sort of chemical. He had a great farm, but because that farmer that would blow over. They closed it. Some of them do, yeah.
All right, can everyone hear me coming through?
Yeah, it's better.
Cool. I switched sides, so hopefully I don't keep hitting it with my hair. You don't realize your little like just talking quirks until you hit the mic 8 times in a row. So.
Then you have to look that way.
I know, yeah. At least I trust myself to keep this back. So, all right, we're gonna jump back in, moving on to best practices for sizing and load calculations. So we're gonna look at sizing methods to complete accurate load calcs, recognize the risks of oversizing and low quality load calculations, the value of high quality load calcs and the tools to do so, and then taking another look back at when to size for heating versus cooling. And so first looking at low quality methods, we have duplicating the existing equipment size. All right, whatever's in there, I'm just gonna throw the same thing in, no big deal. Rule of thumb, you know, kind of when you stand across the street and just get a nice view of it like, oh yeah, that's about a 3-ton, good to go, right? We don't need a load calc. No, these are what we do not recommend. You know, just thinking about the effort in, effort out, not putting effort into a load calculation, you're not gonna have accurate answers and the equipment is not going to perform as expected. So let's look at some medium quality methods. So this is actually taking into account a comfort consultation with your customer, block load calculation, so manual J or equivalent, accounting for that detailed building envelope information, as well as factoring in your specific location design temperatures. So this, you know, just kind of looking at your standard block load calculation, manual J, not going to that full in-depth room by room, but this is kind of that first tier of recommended best practice. You know, it's great if you can do a little more detail and nuance, but if you can at least get that block load calc done, that's gonna be a lot better than just using a rule of thumb or guessing. And so high quality methods, not much changes here. A lot of the same stuff we just mentioned, but really just upgrading to that room by room manual J with just more detailed information provided. Another note on the high quality methods is depending on the data available, depending on the thermostat and what the customer has access to, you can factor in the existing equipment's runtime and look at the utility bills to kind of understand, you know, how much is it operating versus how much would you expect? Is this oversized because we see that it's only using this much energy to run in short cycles? You know, there's a lot that you can learn from that runtime or utility bills. It's just not always accessible. But that's another piece that we like to keep in kind of these high quality methods if you do have access and are able to do that analysis. And so a note on design temperatures when we're doing manual J for load calculations. So there's a lot of different values depending on the source. We can look at ASHRAE, we can look at what's built into manual J, maybe we're using the NEAP tool. They have different design temperatures. Our best practice is to use the Minnesota Mechanical Code just to follow that state standard, but just calling out here that you're going to see a lot of different values depending on the tools that you're using. And the most important note here is that when you're starting with the load calculation and you're choosing your design temperatures, if you're looking at any other tools and plugging them in to do other calculations, or you want to look at the NEAP tool, just make sure that you're using the same design temperatures across the board for that consistent information through your calculations. And so just going through a few different approved solutions for load calc. So Cool Calc, Manual J, Wright-Soft, you know, a bunch of these familiar programs. And then the two that I do want to highlight are Amply and Conduit Tech. These are fairly new. And these are those room scanning software using that LiDAR technology. So I know you can do it like with an iPad and scan around a room and it will automatically map it. And then you can alter different values for the rooms depending on what you know about insulation or if there's an addition that needs a significant change from kind of the weatherized profile that you choose for a home. But it's supposed to really help reduce that time to do a load calc when you can just walk through and scan and then just make any individual tweaks depending on what you notice as needed. I guess, has anyone seen these? Amply, Conduit Tech? Got some hands. Yeah, I guess any thoughts, or is this something that you would all be interested in? Because I know we had some pilot studies going last year with one of these, but I know that if I run into anyone who's looking for more pilot partners, if anyone's interested, just feel free to reach out, because we're just trying to learn more about how effective these load calc tools are, because if they can dramatically reduce that time, and it's fairly accurate through some of the studies that we're doing, it would be really helpful, because I understand time is the biggest constraint in a full manual day. So, all right. So now that we're talking about Manual J, we can also talk about that it's fairly conservative. It has a lot of built-in conservative assumptions, so we don't need to be too worried about applying a bunch of extra weights to make sure that we're in the clear with our sizing. This is back from, oh gosh, it was a study done by CEE in 2017, I want to say, and all of the individual sites are across the bottom here. You can see the far left bar, that really dark blue, that's contractor A's calculations, and then the medium blue is contractor B's calculations. Both of these contractors knew that we were grading their homework. They knew that they were submitting these load calcs to be analyzed. The red bars are the measured data for the sites. And so 2 contractors who knew exactly what they were signing up for submitted their load calculations for all of these sites, and then we actually were able to get measured load data. You know, we see at the end, like, we're getting pretty close. Those aren't too bad. 7, 8, and 9 aren't egregious, but you can see across the board just how much lower that heating load is versus what we arrived at from completing Manual J. I mean, there's some other things that could feed into that, just the nuance of how everyone goes through the process. Maybe you're using a slightly different tool or software, you know, if we're looking between A and B. But I just think this is really helpful to look at, because I know if it's like you're in between equipment sizes and you're like, oh, I'll just jump up to the bigger one to make sure I'm good. And it's just helping you understand that even if you're doing a high effort full load calc, you're probably risking oversizing more than anything if you do kind of do that next jump up just to try to cover. And so if we want to look at a quick example, just kind of comparing Manual J versus rule of thumb. So we're going to look at this house, 2250 square foot, built in the early 1970s. Ductwork looks a little small. You know, homeowner feedback, we're not going to get into this in too much detail, but just for the sake of the example. And so I did a load calc on this house using the Better Built Northwest tool for sizing. There's a lot of other values you can change in here, but I just kind of took some screenshots of a few of the main things that you can plug in here. And so what we arrived at, you know, 51,000 BTUs per hour heating load, about 4.3 tons of a heating load. Okay, you know, that makes sense. You know, we're looking at St. Cloud, that heating to cooling ratio, like heating looks a little high, but it's not a perfect tool. But then if we go back to a rule of thumb, like, I don't know if you've heard the 1 ton per 400 square feet. If we plug that in, that puts us at 5.6 tons for the heating load. And so the Manual J lands at 4.3. And so from just going from rule of thumb to actually doing the calculation, we can see that the rule of thumb oversized by over a ton. And then even thinking about the built-in weights and assumptions that Manual J has is, I don't know, I might look at a 4 ton or a 3.5 or try to do another load calculation with a different tool to understand this nuance, because especially if we're in a case where we can benefit from sizing the heat pump a little bit more closer to the heating load to take advantage of some operational cost benefit, I really want to make sure I'm not going to be super oversized on the cooling side. So, see, said it again. I don't know. Anyone keeping track, tally marks on the don't oversize for cooling? All right, so looking at benefits of accurate sizing. So sizing the system accurately will allow it to operate as efficiently as it can, providing really those best benefits to your customers. So longer run times help improve things like filtration, dehumidification, really increasing that temperature balance and consistency throughout the home. It's more energy efficient. And oversized equipment loses out on these benefits. And so if we're looking at some of the risks from oversizing, you know, not being able to work with the existing ductwork, we're going to have shorter run times, risks of short cycling, more noise, reduced dehumidification. You know, if we're oversized for cooling in the summer and it hits that point quickly, house is going to feel cool but damp. You know, if you can't get those longer run times to help with that moisture removal from the air, I know that's a fairly common issue that I've heard about, especially in our climate, if people are trying to take advantage of any operational cost and they size it a little bit too large for summer. So Another risk here is, if you're kind of between two equipment sizes or you're guessing and you go with a bigger one because of what you think the load is, just maybe needing larger electrical circuits or any sort of upgrade there. That's another reason to really think about being cautious with oversizing, because I know that customers are not going to want to think about that type of upgrade in addition to the investment in their new HVAC system. And so starting with accurate load calcs can really help mitigate these risks and make sure that the equipment is performing as expected. And so one thing I do want to kind of pivot to for a little bit is weatherization. So it's really important to ask a homeowner if they're planning to have weatherization work done. Let's say they're like, yeah, I want to apply for, this program or grant, or I'm planning to do this on my windows next year or air sealing, but they need to get their system replaced now. Let's say it's replace on fail. Even if it's not something like ideal case would be, they just got weatherization done, they're ready to go, they're moving to their HVAC system, makes everyone's life easier. But in the future, it's helpful for you to understand so you can pick a system that's flexible to future lower loads. If they're not having anything done until next year, the next few years, they're still gonna have the same system that's being installed today. So just understanding how that can impact those home loads, looking at variable speed systems so that you have a better turn down ratio and the ability to modulate. And so you're at less of a risk for the equipment that you're installing today being oversized next year once they get a bunch of weatherization improvements done on their home. Does that make sense to everyone? I know another thing that I've found super helpful is if I do a manual J load calc on a home, and I'm like, okay, it's really nice to play around with, okay, if we did insulation, air sealing, if we did some window replacements, did some different jobs and then just rerun the manual J so you can see some different scenarios as well, that can help you understand like the potential load reduction too, so that when you're looking at a system, you can see, okay, it looks good today, and if this happened and changed the load, doesn't look oversized here either. So I'll show the NEAP sizing for heating tool later, and we can kind of look at how it's really easy to kind of walk through those examples and plug in some different loads to understand the operational profile. And so I essentially kind of just covered all of this by talking on the last slide. So it's really just asking if they're considering weatherization. If yes, we said ideal case, installing at the same time or after weatherization is completed is the best, but obviously that's not really how this works. You also want to be able to close a job. You don't want to wait around and try to go back and forth and have some other work done before you are having this equipment installed. So yeah, I think that's all I have on weatherization. I guess any questions on weatherization? All right. Cool, so talking about sizing. So when to size to the cooling load or closer to the cooling load. So this is when your auxiliary heat is less expensive. So, really applicable for those natural gas customers and dual fuel solutions. This is kind of our typical use case we see here for sizing that heat pump closer to the cooling load. And so when to size to the heating load, and so this is helpful to displace an expensive auxiliary heat. So this is for propane or delivered fuel customers, and then customers also with electric resistance heat here too. So just a few notes. I know I said it again. Make sure the system's not oversized for cooling. So this is where we can recommend using variable speed systems that just have more flexibility with their modulation. And then additionally, supplemental dehumidification can be really helpful here too. If we're seeing like someone has propane, it's gonna be way better if I can squeeze a 4-ton in here instead of a 3-ton, even though that's a little more oversized for cooling. If you can look at some supplemental dehumidification, that can also help mitigate some of the lack of dehumidification from shorter run times. But I don't know, that's with the trade-off of some of the impact of short cycling, which isn't great on the compressor either. So just kind of got to play around with this, but this is where variable speed solutions are very, very helpful in these cases when we need to size closer to the heating load. All right, so we went through sizing methods, risks of oversizing and low quality load calcs, the value of high quality calculations, and when to size for heating and cooling. Yeah.
I was gonna mention something because I noticed, we do a lot of ductless mini splits, and actually on a lot of the calculations on the ductless mini splits, if you look at the BTU's rating, the heating load for the tonnage is higher typically than your cooling rating. So say if you got 12,000 BTUs of cooling on a indoor head,
Yeah.
you're actually gonna be able to produce 14.5 on the heating side. So something to be mindful of too, that you may not have to oversize for the heating. This heating kind of already is oversized part of that, so.
Yep. No, it's a very good point on the ductless
The
side.
ducted is not quite as forgiving on that, but the
Yep.
ductless is.
I know, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish we did a little bit more ductless for things like that. It is really helpful with the nuance of those installations. You're like, oh, I can actually take advantage of this a little bit, where the ducted systems are, it's really tricky with that big difference between heating and cooling loads. So yeah, thank you. Awesome. Any other questions or thoughts on sizing? Okay, cool. We're gonna jump right into ductwork and airflow. So we're gonna go through recognizing the importance of a ductwork assessment, really just a basic rundown of how to do this assessment, homeowner evaluation, and just kind of a general evaluation of ductwork. We're not going into like any super in-depth testing, but I'll call out some different options at the end. And then looking at how to diagnose any existing issues and resolve through feasible modifications or replacement. So why is it important to assess the ductwork? So sometimes heat pumps may need more airflow than traditional systems. This depends, it's possible. Existing homes commonly have poor ductwork. I mean, I don't know if I've walked into a house and not been able to find something wonky. I mean, my house is 1906, so I'm fixing little things here and there all the time. Because when that was retrofit, it was a long time ago. You're never going to have that perfect ductwork when you go into a home, so it's just always something we have to think about. And even if you install the best heat pump ever, it's not going to perform if the ductwork isn't setting it up for success. So we put together this kind of minimum best practice decision tree. So first, looking at airflow requirements between the existing system and the new system. Then you kind of go through that homeowner evaluation and assessment, understand kind of their experience and how that can plug into you diagnosing any issues. And then you can go through kind of that basic evaluation. I'll show the steps a little bit later. But those are kind of our big three places we're looking for red flags, I guess. If anything is flagged, that's where we should jump immediately down to conducting static pressure tests and better identifying root cause of the issue. Ideally, we would be doing static pressure tests on every single installation, pre and post, existing system if you can, if it's still functional, new system, but this is looking at minimum best practice. So we're gonna go through and start with looking at airflow requirements. So we're just going to be using this rule of thumb, just regional CFM per ton assumptions, just to show some basic math of the concepts that we're looking at here. So you can see in our region, we are 400 CFM per ton. So let's see if the heat pump requires the same airflow as the existing equipment. So in this case, we have a 60,000 BTU per hour condensing gas furnace and a 3-ton single stage AC. Let's say in this case, customer has natural gas, they had some weatherization done, and now that 3-ton AC is a little oversized. So we're gonna go to that 2-ton variable speed air source heat pump in this case. And so if we're finding the airflow of the existing gas furnace, we're using this formula 150 CFM times that rated BTU input divided by 10,000. So 60,000 divided by 10,000, just 150 times 6, about 900 CFM is that approximate airflow needed for the furnace. And if we're looking at the existing AC, this is where we're going to use that regional assumption from that map, about 400 CFM per ton, 3-ton single stage AC, 1,200 CFM estimated needed for that AC to run. And for the new air source heat pump, we're going a little bit smaller, kind of given the scenario that I shared on. So going down, looking at that 400 CFM per ton, we're at 800. So we look pretty good here. Not too concerned. We don't need more airflow than what we've already been needing. Obviously, we still need to go through the other steps and check if there are existing issues. But if things look good, this is a helpful way to understand that, like, oh, I don't need to look out for a bunch of additional modifications because my required airflow fits nicely into what the existing system needs. And so if we look at one that's a little bit different, furnace needs 900. Let's say we're going from a 2-ton AC to a 3-ton heat pump because we have some heating savings opportunity with operational cost. this is where, okay, this heat pump seems to need more airflow than our prior system, so we're going to have to look at how the ductwork system can accommodate this. And so once we do that first assessment, understanding what the homeowner thinks. How well is hot or cold air being delivered? Where are they most comfortable in the home? Where are they most uncomfortable in the home? I learned that one recently. I really liked asking about where they're most comfortable, because then that can just help you understand of, okay, this section of the home is actually, like, they're having good experiences with the delivered air, not just asking about the negatives. And then asking about indoor air quality issues too, if that's something to look out for as you're assessing the ductwork. And so let's say the homeowner is perfectly happy, loves their ductwork, couldn't ask for anything better. All the time, right? So in that case, we pass, and then we're going to go to our own inspection. And so checking the airflow, turning on the system, fan to high, just kind of doing that register check, feeling that air is coming through all of those registers. If we're seeing some issue with air movement, signifying that the duct may be crushed, blocked, disconnected, we should probably investigate what's going on with that run if we're not feeling some airflow. Checking for noise and vibration. This could be deterioration actually within the metal of the ductwork, incorrect sizing, inadequate securing. I finally fixed my rattly ductwork in my basement. It was just so loud every single time the furnace came on, and I finally fixed it this year, but it's terrible. So could just be that, hopefully not deterioration. And then another thing to look for is ductwork in unconditioned space. So just understanding this and seeing if we should have, I thought that was the next slide. There we go. Understanding if we should have insulation around the ductwork, especially in that unconditioned space, risk of that condensation buildup and then deterioration of the metal. Seeing if we can identify any visible damage or leaks in the ductwork as well, just to show different bends or sections that would need replacement. And so if we run into an issue at this point, because very rare that we make it through 3 check boxes all the way, like existing ductwork is perfect and we're good to go. I mean, fantastic if that does happen, but if there's an issue, that's where we want to jump to a static pressure test to give us more information about the system and help us better diagnose where we can maximize the impact with our ductwork retrofits. So being able to perform static pressure tests to measure that total external static pressure as well as your filter pressure. So being able to take these measurements and then reference the manufacturer recommended ranges of static pressure that this equipment should be operating within. So just being able to, I just have an example table here, but you can see kind of the shaded blue areas, like, all right, this is the ideal operating range for this equipment for that total external static pressure value, single speed, variable speed, a little bit wider, and being able to cross-check your measured TESP with manufacturer recommended. Because if you're outside of this range, you're going to want to identify places, typically with that pressure buildup, that we need to reduce to allow for better optimized equipment operation. And then another note here is that variable speed systems will very seldom be on maximum airflow. And so as we're thinking about static pressure and doing tests at different airflow levels, it's really nice and recommended to play around with that speed so you can see kind of at this medium capacity or lower heat and fan speed and understand how that's impacting your static pressure, because if we're just measuring on full blast, that's not going to be accurate to most of the operating time for the system. And so if you have high TESP, always check the filter first. Filter first, always. This is the most common cause of high TESP. And so being able to even measure that pressure around the filter too can help you understand how much is this contributing to the buildup as well. So just another reminder there too on homeowner education, making sure that they get maintenance and that they're changing their filters frequently enough as well. And so being able to identify other components that add up to total external static pressure, really our goal here for this minimum best practice is not to have you do this whole big retrofit of ductwork if we see a lot of issues, but try to go through and identify anything big and significant so that the work that we do put in can be really impactful. I know one of the biggest things that you can do is just increase the size of the return drop. That helps a lot. If you have some space and you can just make that return a lot larger, I've seen some that are a lot small, and that's really not going to help with your static pressure situation, but that can be a much less invasive solution to help decrease that static pressure without having to get into the guts of the house more and actually deal with some bends and specific joins. So just really trying to figure out how you can maximize the output of the work that you put in, because no customer wants to add ductwork modifications onto their job either. And so when these modifications are feasible, modify the existing ductwork. Depending on what you can do, there's some other things you can think about too. Maybe we size closer to the cooling load in this situation because we actually can't handle that additional airflow, and the customer would rather that than more ductwork retrofit. Upsizing the return duct size, base cans, major plenum connections. Maybe we look at kind of a creative solution. I know I'm looking at this for my house actually because I have fairly small ductwork. It's an old house, and I'm thinking about doing a split system, like part ducted and then ductless upstairs. So that can always be a good solution to help address ductwork that's too small without needing to go upgrade it all. Adding additional runs, increasing the duct size to the registers. Sometimes there's just these really small branches for some reason, and a quick upgrade of those can really help with the balancing of the pressure of the system. And sizing for maximum airflow just kind of gives you a little bit more wiggle room. Just a few different things to consider for modification. So when you cannot modify the ductwork, this is where you have to look at replacement. So just really important to be upfront with the homeowner. No one wants to, it's expensive to do a full ductwork replacement in your home. So I think just being upfront, honest, like, hey, whatever we install is not going to work well with what we have right now. We can look at replacement or we can look at ductless solutions. So I think just being upfront and helping them understand the situation, because they don't want to invest in this new nice heat pump if it's not going to be working very well without a bunch of other upgrades. And so this is just kind of an overview of what we covered. So our minimum practice is kind of that, homeowner interview, visual inspection, doing that non-diagnostic commissioning of the system. Better practice, static pressure tests, recommend doing this on every job. Other things that we didn't talk about is doing more duct balancing or actually measuring airflow at individual registers with a flow hood. And then moving to professional grade, this is where we're doing a full duct blaster, duct leakage test, and actually doing a manual D. We always recommend doing whatever additional testing and analysis you can do, but we understand that time constraints are very real, and you need to get to the next job, and you can't spend a ton of time doing all this additional analysis. So this is kind of our attempt to put together this minimum best practice, meet in the middle. How can we make this assessment and upgrades feel a little bit more feasible without having to dig fully into these more in-depth processes and analysis? So any questions on ductwork? All right. I think I have just like 2 more things. We do have this duct retrofit decision guide available on our website. It's just a tool that kind of walks through some different scenarios, things to look for, definitely more detailed than the section I just shared, but kind of similar principles and practices and how it's laid out. So we went through the importance of a ductwork assessment, kind of those 3 main steps to assess and determine whether further testing or modification is needed, and then just looking at those key issues and possible resolutions through modification or replacement. So with that, we will go on to control strategies, and yeah, we're looking good on time. So I'm gonna do this section and then we'll take another break and then come back for the last third of the training, if that sounds good to everyone. Cool. So control strategies, my personal favorite. So we're gonna look at summarizing best practices for thermostat selection, especially for dual fuel heat pump systems. We're going to look at different balance points and switchover temperatures. How do you identify them? When should you choose them based on the customer's priorities? And then we're going to look a little bit at some control strategies for auxiliary heat. Not too in-depth. I know there's a lot of really great built-in proprietary controls algorithms, especially for a lot of those communicating systems, but we'll talk about a couple basic additional control strategies for anything set more manually. And so selecting the proper thermostat is critical. So this is especially important, if you're not doing a heat pump to heat pump replacement, you're going AC to heat pump. So talking about dual fuel systems, we want to make sure that you're choosing a dual fuel compatible thermostat. So there are a lot that will say, I'm heat pump compatible, but they're not necessarily dual fuel compatible. So some features to look for. So 4 more wires or wireless to make sure that we have a way to control the reversing valve of the heat pump. Dual fuel control software to control auxiliary heat and have that communication. And then your outdoor air temperature monitor. So this is what you can use to set your switchover and condenser lockout temperatures. So either a hardwired sensor, wireless sensor, Wi-Fi connection from your thermostat to a local weather station, I know is an option. And then as I talked about before, depending on comfort preferences, we could look at a supply air temperature sensor instead of doing that outdoor air switchover temp. So one thing I did want to bring up here, has anyone had any issues with your outdoor sensor, depending on where it's located and if it's in the sun or the shade and reading like very wildly inaccurate? Okay. I would say I've been hearing more about this, and it's just something I wanted to bring up because I'm like, I feel like intuitively, my gut feeling is, oh, I just want to wire something. I don't want to do a weather station. I don't want to risk Wi-Fi going out. But the weather station might actually be a more accurate way for that temperature reading, depending on where the sensor's located. So yeah, I guess anything anyone wanted to share on that? I saw several nods. Yeah.
Is that something that you would have to get with the thermostat, or is that something that can be supplied by the manufacturer of the equipment?
It would be thermostat connectivity. So depending on, proprietary thermostats, some of those have the options. I can't recall of the third parties. I think the Ecobee has the weather station connection.
It does.
Yeah, it does. Okay.
Honeywell does too.
T10s.
Yeah. T10s. And then some equipment comes with the outdoor sensor right on the outdoor equipment, so that's controlled through there if it's communicating.
Okay. And where is it? Just it's automatically built in, so you don't change
Yeah, so
the
when you
location?
hook up your communicating wires, it's built into the board on the outdoor unit so that it
Gotcha.
senses it right there, and it's usually just sticks right out of the bottom of the electrical. But that's the case where you gotta make sure you're not south-facing and
Yep.
face the sun, so.
Absolutely. No, interesting. Thank you. I always like to chat about that a little bit because it's
But sometimes I even tell customers, well, if they do have south-facing, to have that sensor in that location, because, I mean, essentially you want the heat pump switchover point to be, because it's taking heat from outside, so if it's warm in that location, it can actually run longer and produce more efficient heat at that point. So
yeah, interesting.
it can kind of throw off the actual, what your real field temperature is out there, so.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's really interesting. Thank you. Awesome. Sorry, and then the last thing here for thermostat features is multi-stage heating controls, optional, but just for more flexibility and comfort and depending on the application. More if we're looking at kind of connectivity of how we can balance things between ductless systems or how an all-electric system would work and stage over time as more heat is needed. So looking at proprietary versus third-party thermostats, just a few quick notes here. So just looking at communicating versus non-communicating systems and just wanting to make sure that you're able to get the most out of the system that's being installed. And so third-party thermostats, totally fine with non-communicating systems. It's the case of communicating systems and third-party thermostats we want to caution around a bit. So, it's not the end of the world, but if we're looking at these full modulating communicating systems, the proprietary thermostat will communicate with that to allow it to fully modulate. And so that's just how you're going to be able to maximize that efficiency and cost savings. But the third-party thermostats, they're in staged operation. And maybe we still have multiple stages, but instead of having that full variable speed curve, it is going to be more of a step function of, okay, we go to this stage, this stage, this stage. So you're going to lose some of that efficiency and operational cost benefit, but it's not super significant. But I think just helping customers understand kind of what they're looking for, because I know a lot of them don't want the proprietary thermostat. They like what they have. God forbid they have a Nest. So it's just kind of something to open up, because if we're looking at something where we don't want to look at like a load control program, and they just really want to make sure they have the most efficient system possible, that's where you really want to help them understand that the proprietary thermostat with communicating is the way to go. But if they do have options like those load control programs, that's where we want to revisit that conversation, because depending on the compatibility and This is different between communicating and non-communicating and fairly nuanced. So please reference the list that we have on our website for help there. But in that case, maybe we don't need to jump right to the proprietary communicating. Maybe they will save more money, operational cost, if they can get enrolled in that load management program and have a simpler control solution. So it just really depends on the programs available between utility service territories. So, and then, yeah, just final note, always ask your distributor or manufacturer's rep for guidance. So especially if customers are like, I really want a third party, I really don't want the proprietary, at least make sure that you can understand from your distributor which thermostats do work better with heat pumps from the third-party solutions. It's like, oh, we've had really good luck with this one actually doing decently well, or avoid this other one at all costs. So it's just helpful to get that from them if customers are really adamant about a third-party solution. So I essentially just kind of walked through this already because I forgot we had a slide going through the example. But this is the example of, she cares about improving comfort, expecting operational cost savings. She likes her current thermostat, but she's getting a communicating system installed. But she just wants to keep the Ecobee able to just have the staged operation. So this is where, depending on programs available, just helping this customer understand that she will be able to maximize efficiency and operational cost savings with a proprietary solution with her new communicating system, unless there are load management programs available. And then you can kind of talk about that side of the conversation too, just to help maximize those cost savings. All right, so going to balance points. The thermal balance point, also called the capacity balance point. So this is the lowest outdoor temperature that the heat pump can meet the heating load. And so this depends on your equipment capacity, your home heating load. And so here, if we look at this graph, we can see our heating load line, kind of that dark line there. And then the orange is we can see a variable speed system. That's kind of your capacity range. You can see that as the ambient temperature gets lower. And so essentially where that heat pump capacity intersects with your heating load line, that's your thermal balance point or your capacity balance point. So that's essentially as low as the heat pump can go, heating the home on its own. And so moving on to the economic balance point, so this is the lowest outdoor temperature that it costs the same or less to run the heat pump than the auxiliary heat. So this depends on your equipment efficiency, your electric rates, natural gas or propane rates. And we're gonna go through a few examples of this, doing just a little math. Promise it's not too bad. So we're gonna look at calculating our economic balance point by starting by finding our break-even coefficient of performance, or the BECOP. And so the formula is shown here. And so your E is your cost for electric. C is a constant. In this case, we're going to be looking at natural gas, so we have the conversion between kilowatt hours and therms. EF is the efficiency of the furnace, just in the percentage. And then G is your cost per therm. So if we want to look at an example, our electric rate is 14 cents per kilowatt hour. Since we're looking at natural gas, our constant is going to be 29.3 kilowatt hours per therm. That constant is just changing depending on the fuel types we're looking at. I do have them listed on the bottom left here if you did want to go check out these slides later to look back at these calculations. And then our gas is about $1.06 per therm. And so if we do the break-even coefficient of performance, so we plug in that electric rate times our constant, 0.96 for our furnace efficiency, and then divided by our gas cost, our break-even COP is 3.7. I mean, 3.7 is pretty high. This is not great, but this is natural gas with a standard electric rate. So let's look at a random piece of equipment. So if we see here, we can look at, actually I'm just gonna make sure these show now. If we look at this chart, we just kind of pulled in this equipment specs chart. So you can see the COP at different temperatures. So COP at 47 is that 3.25, at 17, 2.55, and then at 5 is that 1.97. So if our break-even COP is 3.7, that switchover temperature for economics is gonna be pretty high. And the reason that I even shared that 45 to 55, it's like, wait, 3.25 is the rated COP at 47, but our break-even is 3.7. The reason I'm looking at this is because we do have the min and max COP values as well. As you can see, like that 3.7, 2.75, and just kind of understanding that, especially with variable speed heat pump systems, they're not gonna be on that maximum compressor speed and airflow. So there is some potential to reach those higher COP numbers, which is kind of why I provided that wide range, but still pretty high for a switchover temperature. The thing that's very cool about the dual fuel programs is that if we were to go back here, oh, so many animations. If we were to change this gas to, or sorry, the electric to the dual fuel rate, and plug that all back into that formula, it would change our break-even COP to 1.9. So that's below 5. So with natural gas, it's actually more economic to still have the heat pump heat all the way down to 5 or lower, just with the dual fuel rate. So just really showing the operational cost opportunity there, because that's a pretty dramatic difference looking at the same piece of equipment. Granted, if customers are held up about additional costs for installation of what may be needed to get that dual fuel rate, being able to talk about the operational cost savings piece can really help them convince. Yeah, go for it.
And Jordan, in that scenario, you're suggesting that you're going past the capacity balance point to run the air source heat pump down as low as you can to say 5 degrees and using supplementary natural gas at the same time for your best economic scenario, correct?
Yeah, honestly, it's just running the heat pump as low as you possibly can. And our limiting factor will now be capacity instead of economic, where with the standard rate, it's definitely economic being the limiting factor. So.
Just switches from one to the other.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's look at another one. We're gonna look at propane with the standard electric rate. So looking at the same formula here, and instead your C is gonna be kilowatt hours per gallon now of propane instead of per therm, and then your G is gonna be cost per gallon of propane instead of cost per therm. And so got the same electric, 27 kilowatt hours per gallon of propane is this new conversion, included on the bottom left just as a constant. And your efficiency is still that 96% efficient furnace, and your propane is about $2.03 per gallon. So our break-even COP is 1.8. It's pretty solid. We have the standard electric rate, but the break-even COP, just because of the cost of propane, we're already looking pretty low. So if we go back to our charts here, oh goodness, go back. So pretty similar to when we plugged in the dual fuel rate with natural gas. It's very close to the same break-even COP, just with the standard rate and propane in this case. So we can see here that that's below the rated COP at 5. And so again, we're gonna be hitting that capacity barrier before we hit the economic barrier with this system. So are there any questions on this? Or any thoughts? Anyone want me to go back to the formula? Or maybe do I have another one? Oh, I do have another one for Excel. Let's do this one. So this is for Excel, looking at natural gas and the electric space heating rate. So won't spend too much time on this, but really the only things that change are that electric rate will reflect what customers will see on their bill after they're enrolled in the space heating rate. And then we're swapping back to natural gas and then using the Excel natural gas value here. So with the space heating rate, natural gas, we're 2.9. Okay, not as bad as 3.7, not as favorable as those first two examples. But if we look at propane with the electric space heating rate, that drops us down to 1.3. Not bad. Even lower, it's like, okay, if we can take advantage of these operational costs, we really need cold climate performance to keep getting better and better to take advantage of these. So, just looking at the graph again, just to show where these land, with natural gas and the space heating rate, you're kind of in this nice middle zone. So as we're talking about that primary heat requirement, so about a 35-degree switchover temperature or less on average to qualify for the space heating rate, that operational cost range fits right in there. We're really estimating based on this chart, but looking at 2.9, okay, where does that fall between the 2.55 and 3.25? It's unfortunately not linear, so we can't, directly find that number. But just seeing those values, that's why I threw in the range of anywhere from 25 to 35, kind of as the economic balance point. And then for propane, again, less than 5, super low number there. So I'm going to stop here a second. Are there any questions on this? I know I showed a bunch, but I want to make sure I didn't go too fast. So, cool. Yeah.
Is there, all this stuff is available for us to access at some other point because.
We're going to send out the slides. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this is something that I know we have a controls resource on, but it's not really with the same view of how the formula is broken down. So, yeah, we have the other controls resource, which still goes through how to do the calculation, but we like to share these out just in case so you can see it explained in a couple different ways. Cool. Okay, just a few quick notes on auxiliary heat control methods. Ducted dual fuel systems, looking at setting or confirming a switchover temperature or a droop temperature. I'll talk a little bit more about the droop in a second here. And then ducted all electric, setting or confirming your lockout temperature, and then looking at different supplemental heat upstaging, any sort of timers or capacity upstaging that you can do. We don't really dig into all electric, but just calling out here for some considerations for kind of how you can set up those auxiliary heat control methods depending on the system. So just really the last thing here, because we don't dig into this too much beyond droop, just always check the default settings when you're setting up controls. Sometimes things change, it's a little wonky, some things might have a built-in droop temperature, might have a default switchover temperature. Maybe you change one thing, but something else is overriding it. So just making sure that you can always check the defaults and make sure that the controls are going to operate the system as expected. And so looking at droop temperature settings, so this sets the maximum allowable temperature drop before the auxiliary heat engages in a system. So droop can either fully engage or upstage the auxiliary heat depending on the type of system you're installing. So as an example, if we have an indoor temperature set point, 70 degrees, our droop setting is 2. If we drop below 68 and the heat pump can't keep it up there anymore and we hit that 2-degree threshold, that's where it's going to kick in auxiliary heat. So it's just kind of this protective setting. So, going back to what Rodney called out about, we're going to hit the capacity before we hit the economic case if we have really favorable economics. Droop is a really great way to set a more aggressive switchover temperature, and then you have that protective droop setting to make sure that customer's always comfortable. But remember, manual J is even oversized compared to rule of thumb. Like there's a high chance that the heat pump can actually go a little bit lower than the capacity balance point that we're identifying. So these types of protective controls are a really great way to try to maximize cost savings, but make sure that the customer stays comfortable. And so let's look at a couple graphs here. So for ducted dual fuel systems, you can see here we have that 70 degrees, we're modulating, maintaining. Okay, now the heat pump can't keep up anymore, we drop down to 68. This is going to kick in the auxiliary heat to bring that back up to the set point. Now I do know, depending on the controls, there's some things where if you go below the droop, you can have the system just come back up to that threshold and then give it back to the heat pump, or you can have the auxiliary heat bring it all the way back up to the set point and then kick it back. I know there are some other nuances there as well, but just calling out a few different ways that setting might be defined depending on the controls you're looking at.
There's delays built in there too, so if it hits that 68, it's got a 30-minute delay. You can set it too so that it doesn't automatically.
I was just gonna say, yeah, because with the short cycling, because imagine if we're just at that awkward temperature where the heat pump can't quite support, and it's like, all right, auxiliary on, heat pump off, and we're just exchanging back and forth. That's not good for either, so yeah. Is that pretty standard you're seeing with the built-in delays?
I mean, it's standard in our practice to put them in there, but because we don't want the short cycling, and a lot of times what will happen is there's built-in delays in the equipment itself as well when it switches between auxiliary and heat pump. So when it hits that point, if you don't put that delay in a lot of times in the thermostat, and it does go right at that threshold, you may end up with no heat.
Yeah.
Either one for a little while.
That's a very good point. Yeah, thank you. I know I don't have my hands actually in this stuff every day, so I'm always excited to hear about what y'all are seeing.
That's what we see sometimes, so.
Yeah, no, thank you. All right, and then just another quick view of this, of if we're using the droop method for ductless or ducted all-electric systems, this is where that simultaneous operation is more common. So if we hit that droop call, we need some more heat. Let's say electric strip heat comes on to help support the heat pump get back up to that set point, for example. All right, so we went through thermostat selection best practices, how to identify balance points and switchover temperatures, and some additional control strategies for auxiliary heat. So with that, I will pause here, and we're at 9:55, so let's come back at 10:05. Sound good to everyone? Awesome, thank you.
Much lower.
Yeah. The state of this.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll just grab my chair.
Well, I didn't see that in my house. Yeah, I mean, he's got a lot of, they've done like all bad situations or 620 to 6.
Yeah. Oh, it's by her then.
So is this something we because of the garden? You can call Nate. Yeah, I'll see when they send it to their website. And if they call Womack, or they'll figure out like, oh, these 3 programs will apply. This one one doesn't fit. It's city or something. Are there any requirements on the contractor? I mean, do they have to have like a specific contractor or like multiple bids? It's not a biggie for us. You have to have control.
They have to.
Everybody does. Yeah, that's pretty legit.
They have applications.
When you get into the city stuff,
They have ours. Exactly.
you still require utility.
So these two parts
Especially in the States. We don't do, I don't think we do any in Minneapolis. Got it on the beat. People are old. The other thing I was thinking, cities will have for instance, they can't. You do your one plans in between. They create what but those so you have or like say they don't make halves. So when you go down, and I think they charge you. Well,
Yeah, well, that's what abandoned that, that's a problem.
So kind of rates should start crossing. 3 times. What is it?
4.
Yeah, it's sold as a 5 though.
Yeah, but because they don't have a,
You know what they do, but it was sold as a 5. We were luckily able to put it.
2 or 4. Yeah, because the UTG will help
You don't even have to get to the other end, just they apply right on. That's what construction. That's just silly though. There's no penalties.
the one that I had to go back to.
yeah.
Just trying to get people to.
Now we're talking about.
How do we know when they get like they contact us directly or
The customer, we send them a check.
Where you guys got it figured out.
But some of the city. So,
Right. But the biggest thing is the ductwork with these 2 systems.
So that's what I compared to most farmers guys can do, find a spot, which is nice. Us, it takes a little more time. I think some of your profile, grades guys, option that you can go through. Absolutely.
Take everything.
Right, that's
A little bit of it is repetitive from utility bill and. But, I know, but I really do like it, every once in a while, I give them something.
It's like Birmingham with the fucking orders. Oh, guess who I heard from today? He's finally ready to move ahead. Usually the bad idea.
The last version I had of it, but we are trying to open up.
For a while.
That's a great way to ask them.
Oh, okay. You're out on your own?
So they'll be supporting a lot of this training.
For some reason, this is.
Where are you at? Oh, okay, good. So I. We're not licensed since we talked.
Yep.
So, does he know how to do this?
Okay, so he's gonna be president. Yeah.
Okay, all right, cool.
I don't have a card.
I'd say that.
Okay, sure.
Spring training.
Yeah, I'll have to see it.
Yeah, let's go do that.
Both, it was one.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, with my wife.
Can't just have people wanting.
Yeah. Victor, nice to meet you. I worked at Great River. I'm sure we can get you guys. It might be me or Mike. We're across the state. Super excited about the training. It's professional. But good to put faces.
Yeah, perfect. I actually do the commercial training as my main job.
So you work with Maria Ginther?
Yeah, she's my boss.
Excellent.
So, but those commercial training, there's a couple of different ways that we're doing these. So we've just started this year. I can see intros that are like for people who want to sell it, who want their sales thing, versus the building owner, what do you need to know then? And then there's all the control.
I'll bring him here, you know, and stuff.
Guys,
Kind of more specialized what you want.
I want you to talk about this or that.
Choose your
or
own
sort of-
adventure.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're finding that it doesn't change what we're saying, but it does change how we want to.
I get what you're saying. I get exactly what you're saying. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. In front of our key accounts group this spring. I still have to do the outreach email, but it's all done.
Yeah, good.
But maybe we'll see.
My boss's boss. So yeah.
Wow. Well, we'll see you guys around.
Yeah. So our whole we're working harder and harder to get closer and closer and closer as a group of people all trying to work towards the same sort of thing.
That's right, you came all the way down here for this.
Our program is new. Triple OC's a slightly less new. Programs are way newer than this program, which is 4 or 5 years ahead. So there's a lot of catching up.
Well, yeah, looking forward to seeing you guys around and helping out over Cat.
Great, yeah.
Just making sure I say hi when I see you.
Yeah, totally, great.
So yeah, great to meet you guys.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Victor, too. If I can be
I know, I need to get better.
We've got like the grocery shop in
When I started here, I went to boiler training and stuff. I built my house at the same time. I said, okay, yeah. So I did it. And I just soaked it on my face. Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah, good to meet you. Are you doing some of this training stuff too?
email and like.
I don't know if I'm not on the agenda.
Okay, no, all right.
Typed it in, but I didn't have the file.
I'll wing it.
Yeah, winging it is never comfortable.
I'll find
We're
it.
gonna find the funds.
Yeah. I'm like, so I financed it. Back to payback on it.
All right, we're gonna get started again here in a minute.
You were actually heating up. Correct. Yes, yes.
Oh, of course.
68-year-old. It's in my garage. It's just perfect. Yep. But no, that was definitely a good setup.
All right.
What I learned when I failed.
Everyone awake? Still with me? One more section. We're almost done. All right, we're gonna jump right in so we can try to sneak you out of here a little early this morning. But next section is equipment selection. And I just like to preface this because I remember when I started working on this stuff, I'm like, what's the difference between sizing and equipment selection? You find your loads and you pick your equipment, right? And just kind of revisiting the importance of understanding the whole home picture, the ductwork system, how that might modify what size equipment we pick, once we have a chance to get into the house and look at that too after a load calc, as well as different controls and programs too that could determine the type of system you're picking just based on what's available. So, just looking at equipment selection from that lens of like, we have our load calcs, but we also have all of this other information that we can feed in to help find the best solution. So we're going to look at some challenges and some recommendations to overcome them, and then we're going to show how tools can be utilized to help support the accuracy of your work. So specifically the NEAP sizing for heating tool, I'll be going through a full walkthrough of that just to show you how that tool works and what you can learn from it. And so what are some challenges and considerations when you're selecting equipment? When to size for heating or cooling? Will the system work with the existing ductwork, or do we need to look at retrofits to help improve airflow or get that static pressure in the right range? Where are we placing outdoor units? Sometimes in this case, like with limited placement options, you might be looking at different combination systems. If you're like, oh, I was on the fence about doing a split system with the ductwork, ducted and ductless system, but then you look at some locations, you're like, actually, that might be better, and having a small kind of side discharge unit fit better than a larger cube style if we want to do a combo. How to factor in future weatherization. I know I brought that up before, just understanding how that would impact your equipment selection. And so looking at Manual S and NEAP, these are kind of our two main focuses today. So first on the updated Manual S sizing guidance, so they kind of have their recommended heating and cooling size limits here. So single and two speed, that 120% is kind of that limit. And then as expected with variable speed, we have a little bit more flexibility with that heating size limit increasing to 150% as that maximum recommended, and then cooling 130%. And so Manual S, I honestly have redone this section probably like 8 to 10 times. I've gone through every single step of Manual S, and it's just really complicated and not practical to have the time to go through every step by step and make sure that you're looking at all these different specs and feeding in. And so I was trying to think, how can I make this more simple, understandable, and just narrow it down to some key principles we can just be thinking about. And so what I landed on after so many iterations, it'll probably change again, but looking at heating to cooling design load ratios and just what we need to be careful about considering depending on where that falls. So first, let's look at this example, 2,000 square foot home in Minneapolis. The heating to cooling design load ratio is essentially just your heating design load divided by your cooling. So here we have our heating load is 40,000 BTUs per hour, and our cooling load is 22,000 BTUs per hour. So that ratio, 1.8. Does that make sense to everyone? It's the heating divided by cooling. And so the key considerations that I want to focus on is what do you need to consider when that ratio is larger than 1.5? That's when we're seeing that the heating load is significantly larger than the cooling load. So we're going back to that not oversizing for cooling conversation, risk of lack of dehumidification in the cooling season. But this is just kind of how we can look at these situations, because I think this is very common in Minnesota, just given our weather profiles and how much higher our heating loads are compared to our cooling loads. So sizing for variable capacity systems. Looking at using more of a balanced approach for dual fuel sizing to avoid oversizing for cooling. Capacity maintenance is really helpful here, being able to have high capacity maintenance, so 70% from 47 down to 5. I know that's the Energy Star requirement that I mentioned, but higher capacity maintenance is a great way to help kind of with this big load differential. Weatherization and ventilation, always recommended. Discuss the options with the homeowner. I think especially like if we're seeing even closer to 2 times the value from the heating to cooling load, that's where you can really recommend weatherization to help shrink the difference between your heating and cooling loads in the home. And then looking at mix and match solutions, looking at zoning and installing systems per zone, different combinations, just depending on the setup there. And then short cycling. Short cycling should occur less than 30% of annual hours in both heating and cooling modes. So just making sure to keep an eye out for that. And I will show in the NEAP tool how to look at that short cycling and understand on an annual operating profile if you're in the right range. And so we do have this resource, the Consortium for Energy Efficiency Sizing Considerations for Heating and Cooling. So this is really in-depth. It's very helpful. There's a lot of good information, but there's kind of a flow chart you can follow to figure out the design conditions, look at different methods, some tips and tricks. This is available on our training resources page if you want to take a look. But we're going to move on to look at the NEAP Sizing for Heating tool right now. So how many of y'all have used this tool before? Few hands, awesome. All right, so what is the value of the NEAP tool? So we can compare different equipment options for a home application. We can plug in our load calculations and our design temperatures, and then we can actually look at the operational profile to identify the capacity balance point, where is that load line intersecting with that heating capacity of the heat pump. We can look at short cycling percentages for both heating and cooling mode. We can also identify where and when we would need supplemental heat. So going through a step-by-step walkthrough, if we're looking at the first input, you can sort by coffee type, ducting configuration, you can filter by brand. If you know exactly the system you want to model, you can just throw in the AHRI number. There is a recent filter added for refrigerant, just with the A2L change. And then if you want to make sure that it qualifies for different programs, tax credit is no longer here, but sorry, I didn't think about that when I was updating screenshots for this, so pretend like that's not there. But otherwise, it does have options to click for what the systems can qualify for those national standards and specifications. And then I do love that for the rated capacity and max capacity at 5, you can kind of narrow both sides of those ranges to help pull up a list of equipment fitting for your application range. And so if we want to look at our example, we're looking at central air conditioning heat pump, single zone ducted, centrally ducted, and just gave some pretty broad ranges here just to show kind of what happens. So this tool will default to the grid view, which is nice, looks nice right here, but it's really hard to look at a lot of systems side by side, especially if you're getting a lot of search results. So I recommend switching to the list view, because then you can actually see everything line by line, and then you can filter by different values or hide different columns. So as we're going back to the how do I size for a lot of heating without oversizing for cooling, one of my favorite ways to use this is to find a heat pump that I want to take on more of the heating load in a favorable situation, and then I sort by that cooling load, minimum to, or cooling capacity, minimum to maximum. So I can find which systems can I kind of find that better cross-section to support that application. And so there is also an option, if you do sign up to be a member, you can download a product list. So if you want to make a general profile with your brand and the systems that you sell for kind of a range of, okay, we're going to do homes that need 3-ton. You can download a list and it can pull you a simple list of systems that could be options for different applications. And so once you get to an equipment page, it'll pull up and there will be information tables. You'll get your heating and cooling capacities, and then you'll also get this performance specs table. So this is just showing all of those measurements kind of as the outdoor air temperature changes. So this is where we can find those rated COPs if we're doing the break-even COP calculation and wanting to find that economic balance point. it does pull up all of this information. And then if you're on that equipment page, at the top right, there is a button you can press for advanced data system sizing. This is the cool part. So in the sizing for heating tool, you can enter in the zip code, and then from there, it'll populate a drop-down, so you can pick the most applicable weather station, and it will auto-populate those design temperatures. Reminder on the auto-populating, way back in the sizing section, if you know which design temperatures you used for your load calcs, make sure that you're using the same ones here, just for consistency of that operational profile. And what NEEP has built in for design temps based on those weather stations aren't always going to match other sources of that information. And then you can plug in your load calculations, your heating and cooling design loads, and then there are some optional settings too. So if you want to see the visual of where the capacity balance point falls and you want to add a lockout temperature, that'll kind of show it on the graph. A couple other things you can do, but really you just need zip code, design temps, load calcs, and then you can run. And so the resulting graph with default settings kind of spits out like this. We're not seeing everything, we're seeing a few things. This is with almost everything not selected. I want to make sure, can everyone see this okay? I know it's probably a little small, but on the left side of the graph, we can see this is kind of the heating operation mode. So everything highlighted in that light red shading, those are all of the hours and times that supplemental heat is needed. Does that make sense to everyone? You can kind of see it's very light yellow and hard to see, but that equipment capacity kind of moving down, and then once we start needing red, that's where the heat pump can no longer support that heating load and we need auxiliary heat. Then on the right side, you can see the cooling load as well, and so you can see the load line and that cooling modulating range for the system as well. And all the blue bars across the back are kind of the hours in the annual temperature bin hours, so you can understand how much time we're spending in each of those sections. And so if we want to look at some of the additional values, so it'll spit out this graph, and then you'll have a table for heating and cooling. And so for heating, they give us the capacity balance point. It's great. You know, don't even have to look at the graph, think like, oh, is that 27 or 28? I don't know. Spits it out right here. Something else that's really helpful is you can see the percent of the annual heating load served. So this heat pump is serving about 33% of the heating load for this home. Cool. Another way to look at that is hours requiring supplemental heat. So on the other side, it's how many hours are we going to need that auxiliary heat to support the heating load of the home is about 2,600 hours of the year. And then here, it's hard to see in this example because this is very optimal. We don't often see low load cycling issues on the heating side, but this does show the percent annual load with low load cycling. And so that's this little tiny green triangle right at the end. And something really cool about this tool that I love is that once you start getting into higher percentages of low load cycling, that triangle will change to yellow and change to red to flag when it's something concerning and to look out for. You know, not too critical on the heating side, but let's look on the cooling side. So here, actually I want to see, yeah, this is the same system. So everything looks pretty good on cooling. But over here we can see, all right, here's our cooling load. You can see our load line here and the hours, and you see how that triangle turned a little bit yellow here? That's showing like, okay, we're not above that 30% for annual low load cycling, but we're getting there. We're at 21.8. Not great, not the worst, but definitely probably worth reconsidering or looking at maybe a few different product models that are similar, the same size. Let's just run the profile and see how this looks, because even very similar pieces of equipment can have some surprising differences if you're kind of doing side-by-side comparisons. And I think just being able to know to look out for the low load cycling risk, especially when we're trying to size the heat pump to take more of the heating load, I love using this tool for that. Just you can run every system you want. You can play around with how much of the heating load can I take on without getting over that 30% low load cycling and increasing that risk. So does this make sense to everyone? Are there any questions? I know it's probably not the easiest to see, but we will be sharing the slides out if you want to take another look through after and reach out with any questions.
What's the lowest that you see them going on cycling? Like 10% of the time?
Oh, I mean, if we go back to the heating one, This one we're at 1.8, great. For cooling, it is hard. It's really tough because even if we're looking at something where we only want the heat pump to go down to 30, say we have a pretty modestly sized, we're sized closer to the cooling load, it's still really wonky. And actually, you remind me, this brings up a good question. I had a contractor recently bring up this exact case with looking at kind of that early need for cooling at that like 70 to 75 range. They're like, well, I have some customers who probably leave their windows open until it gets to like 78 and then they'd turn the AC on. Worth a conversation. Because if that is kind of their standard practice in their home, you probably have a lot less of that short cycling risk if they're not turning on the AC until 75 or 78 if they want their windows open. But on the other hand, air quality. And with the wildfires every year, we also want to make sure that we can have fresh, clean air inside with windows closed in days like that too. So, but yeah, Ian, your comment just reminded me of that question too, of if we're seeing this risk based on their behavioral practices, is there a little bit more flexibility? So, but yeah, I mean, we can get it pretty low. I think the lowest I've seen for cooling and like a really nice, fully thought out analysis is probably like a 6%, 7%. Yeah. I have an example from a bunch of old slide decks I can poke through and send to you. So, yeah. All right. So, low load cycling, oversizing for cooling. Am I at 50 yet? I don't know. But this one I love to look at because if we just completely ignore the cooling side of the graph, look at the heating side. This looks pretty typical. Okay, we have our capacity balance point. What is that? About 22, 23 degrees. That heat pump can serve the heating load down to a decent amount, switch over to auxiliary. Look how crazy oversized that is for cooling, though, in this case. You can see that our percent annual low load cycling is about 62%. The triangle turns red. But it looks like a pretty normal application on the heating side, at least from a lot of these examples that I've run. So I think just double checking and understanding, because even if your loads are sometimes closer to, if you don't have like that big of a spread with the ratio, just sometimes depending on where those min and max capacities fall, you can run into some more issues than you'd expect for fairly typical applications. So cool. Any questions on the NEAP tool before I move on? All right. So we went over some challenges and how to overcome them, did our walkthrough of the NEAP tool just to kind of show how that can help you identify some key factors when making your decisions for equipment selection. But just calling out, this is nuanced, it's complicated. It's important to understand your homeowner's priorities and all of the other things feeding into the system after you do your load calcs to help you make a very educated decision on which equipment to select. And so this is technically the last real section. I have a few closing slides after this, but we're almost there. So installation best practices, we're just gonna look at some photos for equipment placement, looking for outdoor unit placement, line set routing installation, and then just looking a little bit at surge protection, electrical panel and service evaluation, as well as filter selection. So we're gonna look at some photos and try to identify issues. For any of you who have been in one of my trainings before, we do have some new photos. It's not all the same. So let's look at this one here. Can anyone tell me what the problem is?
Defrost in the walkway.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so this one's been installed in a walkway, and whenever any of that condensation, melts, drips, and refreezes, creates a slip hazard. And so best practice is to place the unit away from walkways to avoid that risk. Okay, what about this one?
Underneath.
Drip edge, it's
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was great. I was actually just scrolling around online and I messaged this person on Reddit and I was like, hey, can I use your picture for my trainings? This is a great one. But yeah, this one had all of that ice all of that water dripping on, refreezing on the unit. So this is the drip line risk, and it was funny, the same person also sent me this updated photo of the little roof they installed over the top of their unit to help protect. So thought that was fantastic. You can also look at considering drip caps when needed in this case, or just, if you can place it in a place where it doesn't need to be protected overhead, but just away from that drip risk, whether you have the gutter protection or different section of the house. So, all right. What about this one? What's the issue about this one, other than the dryer vent also being right there?
It's right by a window, so it
Yep.
noise.
Yep. This is just the basic comfort and happiness of homeowner. Don't want it too close to a window so that it's loud.
It's not a bedroom window.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so best practice is to place units where they're less likely to bother occupants with the sound. And if you do have any of those wall-mounted systems, there are those double-ended vibration absorbers that you can also have there that can help improve the experience of being inside the home when the system's running. So, all right, what about this? How do we get here? Yeah, so homeowner didn't know to remove the snow around the unit, or maybe, we didn't get that much snow, but the wind blew it all up and drifted like that one I saw a couple weeks ago. Yeah, just kind of a callback to that homeowner education and helping them understand that their system won't operate unless it is free from obstructions to the airflow. So best practice, also kind of a call out to stands here. I know that the options depend on the equipment, the type of equipment, and how high you can actually get it up. Getting it above the snow line depends on the year here. I've lived here for 6.5 years now, and the snow has been very back and forth. So I think really here is just focusing on that homeowner education and making sure that if they're out of town and the neighbor's doing their sidewalk, can the neighbor also clear their heat pump? Just little things like that. Okay, this one is really hard to tell what we're getting at, but pretend like the wind and snow is blowing directly towards the house in the system. Any thoughts of what that could cause?
They have optional wind baffles for some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in this case, I don't know how much, it really depends regionally around Minnesota how much we deal with that dominant wind direction.
When they get put up on roofs on commercial buildings, a lot of times we run into it in those scenarios. But otherwise, typically there's some kind of windbreak on that north.
Yep.
Open areas.
Yeah, no, I've heard more like some around the Duluth, Mountain Iron area, and then some in like Northwest, like Fargo, Moorhead area. I've heard of more of the dominant wind direction. And also Southwest and Marshall. But it's interesting because I didn't realize that wind direction, could actually cause that counter rotation of the fan and then cause that fan circuit or motor to fail. And that's not a fun replacement. So
Fujitsu shuts off the whole system, and then it's
it does?
It's got to be a hard reset, which is I believe it's a 10-minute shut off. I know this from experience because it happened on my own. I called in for a warranty motor, and then I went through tech support, and they told me to do this. And I'm like, I cycled it. I never would have thought to cycle it off for as long as they told me to.
Huh.
So,
interesting. I didn't know that there were any.
It was a long time. I sat there and waited. So.
Awesome. Thank you. That's a great one. I'm gonna go check that out. So. All right, what's missing on this line set?
A little bit of insulation, it looks like.
Yep, here we're just looking for insulation, so making sure to insulate the line set. There are some efficiency benefits here because you do have some efficiency loss when it's not insulated, but I think the most critical thing here is actually protecting that tubing from any potential deterioration. Question, I know there's been this new kind of line set insulation I've seen, it came out and it had like this UV rating and it was this white line set insulation, but then I heard it was terrible. Yeah. Terrible, right? Okay, still terrible. I just wanted to make sure. So, because we've been trying to find like recommended insulation to just put on our resources, and I just feel like I'm getting a lot of mixed reviews back and forth, especially with the UV protection too. So, okay. glad to know nothing's changed there, so thank you. All right, so a few call outs to some other installation best practices. Surge protection, we always recommend this. It's a low-cost solution to protect expensive equipment, particularly valuable for any systems with microprocessor components. So, all variable speed systems and many of the single and two-stage systems do have these microprocessor components that are at greater risk. And we know how much of a pain some of those boards can be to replace too. And when you're thinking about how much the customer's investing in this very expensive, nice system, another, 100 to $300 for protection from like 1 to 3 surges from some solutions I've seen online to help protect, $10,000 or so investment into their system. So this can be a really good one, especially if a customer is in a place where they're susceptible to more power surges or if they have experienced them. This can be a great recommendation as kind of just extra protection for them to have. I guess how many of y'all are installing surge protection? Standard?
Manufacturers won't warranty.
I was gonna say, I did actually read recently a lot new warranty guideline updates where they didn't have as much built in there, but I bet you it's because of all the claims that they're getting and having to support those replacements.
Serial number on
Yeah.
it when you're on line with tech support.
Good to know, good to know. Cool. All right, and then 2 little extra things here that we don't go too into depth here, but we do have this printed resource for each available online. First is this electric service and panel evaluation. So this is really looking at do we have to do any upgrades? Are there the right available circuits if I'm putting in a larger electrical system? Is the amperage delivered to the home sufficient to power new appliances, especially if someone's looking at multiple electrification home upgrades and we need to start considering that. So that really goes through kind of how you can analyze a home's electrical load, understanding how to optimize panel space, so maybe you don't need to do an upgraded panel, understanding when you actually do have to upgrade the service and revisit that conversation with the homeowner depending on what's being installed. And then my favorite part of that guide is really strategies to avoid just upgrading the panel if you need to. So there's a lot of fun creative solutions and some load balancing timer stuff that gets a little bit into the weeds, but can be really helpful if you are ever dealing with a homeowner in that spot of some electrical upgrades and we don't have enough space or amperage to fully deliver on this without an upgrade. And then the next one, filter selection, we just have a basic written guide here, just looking at static pressure impacts of different types and sizes of filters, where they should be located, and just some general other options depending on equipment layout and where you can have air filtration, especially for homeowners that are very concerned with indoor air quality and maybe want a more robust filtration system. And so we do have a best practices installation guide on our website that you can reference. So this is really kind of our guiding tool for when we're approving site verifications for those who want to join our preferred contractor network. So I'll share a little bit more about that as I wrap up. But this guide really walks through a lot of the key things that we're looking for, and it's available by scanning the training resources on your handout. And so, just looking at some examples for outdoor unit placement, line set routing and installation, and surge protection, electrical panel, and filter selection. So with that, I just have a few more things, and then I will turn it back over to Robin. So next steps for contractors. It seems like people are just getting more and more familiar with heat pumps, so I don't know that the first line is as relevant anymore, but it's great to be able to practice at installations at employee homes to gain experience with the technology, increase your confidence, being able to leverage and stack financial incentives and lending products to help your customers take advantage of everything that's out there. I know the tax credit went away, but we still have a lot that's existing with the utility rebates and programs, and then hopefully with, fingers crossed, the Save Energy Minnesota programs that can also help lower that upfront cost barrier for customers. Making sure that you're attending ongoing distributor and manufacturing trainings. This is really critically important just to make sure that you're up to date on new technology, new equipment, how does this work, any key changes, and they are always going to be your best resource for different nuances that you're running into when installing that equipment. And then staying engaged with your utilities on rates and programs. So you all coming here today to Wright-Hennepin's Contractor Breakfast, great way to stay engaged, and we recommend doing this for whichever utility service territories you're working in. It's the best way to stay connected with how programs are changing over time and how you can take advantage of them. And so our preferred contractor network, I do have some flyers in the back that I'll set out in a couple places if anyone is curious to take one. But we want to help you generate more leads, find more customers. The main requirements to join our network are our training, which you're done as of today. That's all set. And then on top of this, there is some paperwork as well as an online site verification. So we just need to be able to do kind of a quality assurance check of a site verification where you just submit some basic information, some photos. We'll go through and either approve or return that. And then once that's approved and we're all set, we'll be able to add you to our website list. Another new benefit coming for our preferred contractor network is a new marketing match program. So this will be available soon for members of our network. And the way this works is that it's a 50% match of contractor spend up to $5,000 in matched funds. So $5,000 available through this marketing match program. The requirements are that the marketing tactics must be reviewed and approved by the Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative, just kind of around our messaging guidelines. So just accurate, honest information about the equipment and the benefits it provides. It is totally brand agnostic, so if you have other programs available through your distributor and manufacturer, the intention is to be able to stack this with those. So if you're able to get some marketing match from your distributor and you need to comply with their brand requirements, and then you can comply with our messaging requirements, and then you can try to make the most out of that for marketing benefit. So we will have more information on this soon that will be on our website. We'll include it in our newsletter. But this is exclusive for members of the Preferred Contractor Network. So, and then, yeah, finally, that is all I have. Please sign up. Oh, come back. There we go. Please sign up for our newsletter. If you're interested in staying in the loop on some of these updates, this QR code should take you to the page. Otherwise, we'll be sending out some information after the training. But some key updates coming up are when that marketing match program will be going live and available for contractors. Whenever we have those updates made to that new heating and cooling savings estimator tool to make it easier for homeowners to understand the cost picture of an investment in a heat pump. And then I will be sending along information on the Save Energy Minnesota programs as soon as it becomes available through our newsletter as well. So those are kind of some key highlights to look forward to coming up. But otherwise, don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions. So thank you.
We have 2 gift cards for those that have attended today.
A lot of pressure. Well, that one, yeah, let's say that one's picked. There we go.
Peyton?
Oh, there we go. And I have Mike Daniels from Our Steel, but I didn't see him in the room.
They don't qualify. They're not here, you gotta redraft.
All right.
He doesn't go in.
Jeff Axelson?
Oh, yay, Jeff.
Nice.
Here you go. Thank you. Just a side note, we'll be sending a survey out after the training, probably hit your email box tomorrow, but if you can fill that out, helps us to, provide training and provide things that are meaningful for you guys. So I want to thank you very much for coming today and spending the time with us. Take a donut with you for the road.
Oh, man. Worked on this picture.
Try not to, but I end up thinking sometimes.
Don't math me. Don't math me.
Yeah, it's all this.
It's for complete. You take what you get.
What's that? Oh, okay, so
That's what I was gonna see if it just makes sense to go over that.
Sure, that's fine, if he wants to do that.
Yeah.
No, we don't need,
I'd only be there for 15 minutes.
yeah, we don't need him, we don't need two of you to do that if you don't think. Yeah.
Okay, let's just move in that here.
Thanks for coming, guys. Yeah, that'd be great. So then you can go back to the shop? Oh, okay. Thanks so much for coming, very nice to meet you.
Hey, congratulations. We're following you.
Is there like
Thank you.
yeah.
I got Kappa. Sean?
You guys do know that the relays.
Yeah, we send ours out